All right. Welcome everyone to our January 12th, 2021 special meeting, which I'd like to call to order. The first item on our agenda is the oath of office, and we have 2 new and 2 re-elected board members. So I'm going to read the oath of office, and there's a section at the end where I'll ask our newly elected board members and our re-elected board members to repeat after me, and then you'll have an opportunity to say a few things if you like. Okay. So first, there's kind of a longer oath that I'll read, and then the short oath that you'll repeat. Okay. So it is an honor that you are elected to guide the education of our community's children. As you recite the oath of office, you assume a tremendous responsibility as a director of our school district with duties empowered by the Minnesota legislature. The power puts you and the other members of our school board in the position of being both morally and legally responsible for equitable, quality education of every student in the district. In carrying out this responsibility, you will be asked to fulfill the roles of vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. In providing vision, the board, with extensive participation of the community, envisions the community's educational future and then formulates the goals, defines the outcomes, and sets the course for the public schools. To achieve this vision, the board establishes a structure and creates an environment designed to ensure all students the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. Because as a board, we must be accountable to the community, we must ensure continuous assessment of our students' achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children. As board members, we serve as education's key advocates on behalf of students in our community schools to advance the vision for our schools. Furthermore, we must strive to work together and with the superintendent and staff to lead the district toward fulfilling the vision we have created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills and knowledge, citizenship, and personal development. Having signed the acceptance of oath and oath of office, I'll ask the 4 of you to please publicly affirm your commitment by repeating the oath of office after me. So again, I'm going to ask you guys to read it one by one, and then again, you'll have the opportunity to say a few words. So, let's see. Steve Hunt, please repeat after me. So I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And of this state.
And of this state.
Yeah. And that I will discharge faithfully.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
The duties of the office of school board member.
The duties of the office of school board member.
Of Independent School District number 622.
Of Independent School District number 622.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Okay, Nancy, please repeat after me. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I'm so sorry. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And of the state.
And of the state.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
The duties of the office of school board member.
The duties of the office of school board member.
Of Independent School District number 622.
Of Independent School District number 622.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you. And then Julia Martins, please repeat after me. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Sorry for the barking dog. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And of this state.
and of this state,
And that I will discharge faithfully.
and that I will discharge faithfully
The duties of the office of school board member.
the duties of the office of school board member
Of Independent School District number 622.
of Independent School District number 622
To the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Okay, thank you. And then Charlotte Natardi, please repeat after me. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I affirm that I'll support the Constitution of the United States
And of this state.
and of this state,
And that I will discharge faithfully.
and that I will discharge faithfully
The duties of the office of school board member.
the duties of the office of school board member
Of Independent School District number 622.
of Independent School District number 622
To the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Okay, so Steve, congratulations on your reelection. And would you like to say anything before we continue with the meeting?
Oh, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm thankful to the public for giving me the opportunity to do it for 4 more years. And welcome the opportunity to be held accountable for the things that we do as a school board.
All right, thanks, Steve. Nancy, congratulations on your reelection. Would you like to say anything?
Thank you. In my 20 years on the board, I don't remember us being in a more difficult time. And I feel so empathetic with parents, teachers, and students right now in this pandemic that we are dealing with. However, I am fully confident that we will get through it together. We have such an excellent administrative team, teaching staff, helpers in the classroom. Everyone is on board and wants the best for our students. So I really look forward to our next 4 years. I look forward to our graduation in the spring. We missed it last spring, and it was, in the fall. Wait, spring. And we missed it last spring, and it was so sad. So it'll be wonderful to have a full-blown graduation once again. And I think that I'm optimistic about the future. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Julia, congratulations on your election and welcome to the ISD622 School Board. And do you want to say anything before we continue?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I am really excited to be able to serve with all of the board members on the board now. And I can't wait to be able to serve our staff of 622, the students and the parents.
All right, thank you, Julia. And Charlotte, congratulations and welcome to the board. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I'm also thankful for this opportunity to be able to serve the community for this coming 4 years. And I also want to take a moment to thank the people who helped me get here, who helped with my campaign. My children who are all here, Eric, Michelle, Danielle, Tyler, you're my son too. They helped me from the get-go and were behind me. I also want to thank my American parents who are also here, Richard and Audrey Johnson, who believed in me from day one and backed me up until election. And also my friends who are also here. I see Cheryl, Becky, Marquita, and the rest of them that couldn't make it here, who really helped me get to this place. And also the community, the resident of ISD622, who believed in me. I'm humbled and thankful. And I am going to work hard on the school board to represent the children, families, teachers, staff, so that we can keep up with the good work that the school district has been doing over the years. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you. And again, congratulations to our 4 newly elected board members.
Congratulations.
Does anyone else want to say anything?
I'll say a word, if it's okay. I'm
Christine?
just so thrilled for our returning board members and for our new board members. So grateful for your leadership and really excited to have you join us in this journey. There's going to be a lot to learn and we'll help you every step of the way. And so excited to have your voice here on our school board. Thank you for making such an amazing commitment to our school district. We're glad you're here.
All right. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the election of officers.
Michelle, can you announce to my people that they're gonna get kicked out now?
Sure, yeah. Typically for these meetings, there's a link on our website where folks can watch the meetings through a YouTube link. And Charlotte was unaware of this and shared the Zoom link instead. And so because we found this out without enough time to correct it, we had you guys enter the Zoom meeting. But I think Josh from our IT area is about to send you out of our Zoom meeting. And if you want to watch the rest of the meeting, you could go to the ISD. Maybe actually, Josh, could you tell me the easiest way to do it? I think through the website.
If you just go, you bet. If you just go to YouTube and search District 622 YouTube channel, you'll find it live streaming right now on our YouTube channel.
All right, thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda is the election of officers. We need to elect a chair, vice chair, clerk, and treasurer. And we've discussed this at multiple meetings. However, any board member can nominate any other board member for these roles. So I'll call for nominations for each of the roles. I call 3 times. And the nominations don't require a second. If we have more than 1 candidate for any role, then we'll have a roll call vote. Okay. So first, I would like nominations for the office of chair. So are there any nominations for chair?
Yes, I would like to nominate Michelle Yenner for chair of the board.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Are there any other nominations for chair? Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, I'm hearing none. Kim, was that enough times or do I do one more? I do the initial ones and or
You
3
need a
total?
of 3 is what we
3
need.
total, okay. So hearing none, I declare Michelle Yenner chair. Thank you for the nomination, Nancy, and thank you for the support from the rest of the board. Next, I would like nominations for the office of vice chair.
I would like to nominate Nancy for vice chair.
All right, thank you, Ben. Any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, hearing none, I can declare Nancy vice chair. Congratulations, Nancy.
Thank you.
Next, I would like nominations for the office of clerk. Are there any nominations for clerk?
I would like to nominate Ben Jarman for clerk.
Okay. Thanks, Caleb. Any other nominations for clerk? Any other nominations for clerk? Okay, hearing none, I declare Ben Jarman clerk. Congratulations, Ben. Then finally, we need nominations for the office of treasurer. So any nominations for the office of treasurer?
I would like to nominate Caleb for office of treasurer.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations for treasurer? Okay, hearing none, I declare Caleb treasurer. Congratulations, Caleb. That was about as smooth as it could go, you guys. So thank you. Next, we have our organizational resolution. So this is our annual organizational resolution. We can vote on items 1 through 19 with one motion. However, if any board member would like to discuss individually, please let us know and we can pull that item. Okay, so this is a lengthy resolution. I'm going to read a portion of it, and then for anyone who's interested, they can access it on our website or from the business office. So be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 622 that the following organizational resolutions numbered 1 through 19 be accepted as presented. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved. It's Ben.
Okay, moved by Jarman.
Second.
Second by, was that Livingston? Okay, all in favor say aye, and instead of saying aye, we're going to ask Kim to do a roll call.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, so that motion is approved. Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda, we have 62 online application to the Minnesota Department of Education.
And we're going to have
And that
Josh
is
Anderson.
Josh
Yeah.
or Christine.
Nope, Josh will present on this one.
Okay.
Well, great. Well, good afternoon, Chair Yenner, directors of the board, and Superintendent Tucci Osorio. Tonight, I am asking the board to approve our application to the Minnesota Department of Education to become a state-approved online learning provider. I want to share a brief history of where we were and where we are headed related to online programming and how we got to this point. We have seen many resident students choose to leave our district for other online providers in the past. We hope that by having a full, complete online high school, many families who live in our district might choose to stay here and not choose other online enrollment options. Our district has worked to increase online course offerings at the high school level to get to a point to have a comprehensive online course catalog. For the 21-22 school year, we now have enough courses to offer a District 622 high school student the chance to take the majority, if not all, of their high school schedule in an online format if they so choose. We want to apply to the Minnesota Department of Education to become a state-approved online learning provider. Doing so would allow us to enroll students from outside of our school district in our 622 online high school. So tonight, I'm asking the board to approve our application to the Minnesota Department of Education to become a state-approved online learning provider. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Michelle?
Yeah.
I just want to take an opportunity to thank the cabinet and Christine and Josh for working so diligently on this. This has been a goal of ours for a long time. Back before we even had devices for students to use, we started working on this, and I just want to give a shout out that this is not only a day for 622, but it's a culmination of a lot of work from a lot of people for a long time. And my kudos to the staff for being able to put this together.
Thank you, Steve. It's really been a lot of work, and it's so ironic that COVID hit in the middle of all this, because we were already starting on this work before COVID, because we already knew that there were students enrolled in our online charter schools. And so we really value the idea not only of having students be able to stay within our community, but be a part of our community. A student who might be doing online classes could also be a part of our band program or one of our athletic programs if they are a student in our school district. So this just opens more doors for students who want that option to be still part of a community as well.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So when COVID ends up being the thing in the past, we go to the in-person learning. Are we going to have enough teachers to do both?
Well, yes, because whenever students who are enrolled in our district choose online classes, then we have to have enough students to make a class viable. But once there's enough students enrolled in a class, then a teacher might teach, for example, 5 periods a day in person and 1 period a day in the online program. But it's really a matter of wherever the students are. We get funding. If more students come back to our district that have already left our district, they bring state funding with them, which helps us to be able to contract with additional teachers if needed. Let's say some of our existing students move to the online classes. All we would do is shift some of our existing staffing to help out with the online program as well. So it wouldn't be so much of an issue in terms of having staffing to fund it. Unlike COVID does not bring extra funding to run both programs, and it's very difficult to staff properly for COVID times because we don't get funding for additional staffing to do it. But for the permanent program, once that happens, the funding will follow where the students enroll. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great question.
All right, so if there is no further discussion, I can read the resolution on this. So be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 622 that the online learning provider application for 622 online be approved as presented. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jarman,
Second.
second by Natardi. I think, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, and all those in favor say aye, and Kim, please call roll.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Okay, so that motion is approved as well. Thanks again to Josh and everyone who worked on that. Yes, it'll be great to have that extra flexibility for our students.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, next on our agenda is adjournment, but I just want to remind everyone that we're going into study session after this. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting, but don't get off the Zoom call because the same Zoom link for the study session. And we need to have a vote to adjourn, so we'll have one more roll call. So can I get a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Anderson, second by Kramer. Actually, I'm sorry. Should I say Kramer or should I say Martins?
You should say Martins. I'm under my
Okay, sorry.
work Zoom.
Okay, sorry. So a second by Martins. So all in favor, say aye.
Caleb
Tim,
Anderson,
please.
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman, Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. And just stand the line and we'll call our study session to order. I'm just going to open the meeting in the board book. All right. So it is 4:58 and I will call to order the January 12th, 2021 work study session. The first item on our agenda is our superintendent check-in.
Thank you. We've actually got just a couple of items for the agenda this evening. And actually, Randy is going to give a little update on budget revisions under my check-in item first. So I'm going to let him begin, and then I'll give a COVID update and then one other item after that. So Randy, do you have a guest? Is Seth a guest that you're expecting?
Say that again.
We have a person in the waiting room, Seth. Is that somebody we're expecting?
Not that I know of.
Okay, maybe it's
We've had him
somebody.
in for quite, he's been in for quite a while.
Okay.
Oh.
They'll have to, look at the, they'll have to look at the Zoom information. Okay.
You all set?
I mean, the YouTube information. Yes. Please go
Okay.
ahead, Randy. We'll begin
All
with
right.
yours and then I'll do my next two quick items after
Okay,
that.
great. Chair Yenner, directors of the board, Superintendent Tuccio Osorio, and cabinet members. We're going to start some discussion. Remember, in December, we certified our levy, and that began our start of developing the 2021-22 district budget. And of course, remember, this budget year goes from July 1st to June 30th. And right now we're in the fiscal year 2020-21 budget. And we always do budget revisions, remember, in January and May. And so we do that to update our revenues and our expenditures so that we can project into the future for the 21-22 school year budget. Again, congratulations and welcome to the board, Charlotte and Julia. Welcome. Somewhere here within the next few weeks, it would be great to get a meeting with you, Zoom meeting, or and then we could talk about. I'm the director of business services, and I'd like to discuss, some of the finance types of things that go on in the district and some of the non-instructional type of areas that they supervise, just to kind of get you familiar. So we'll be reaching out to do that. What a good time would be for you to meet for about an hour. So Josh, did you give me sharing rates? Perfect. Okay. All right. Can everybody, did that come in? It did. Okay, great. So tonight, what I'm going to do, this will be rather quick. We're going to talk a little bit about 2020-21 January budget revisions, the current budget year, again, which ends June 30th, 2021. We're going to take a look at current and projected enrollment, and then we'll do some initial budget assumptions for next year's budget. So with that, I'd like to just, before we start, I would kind of like to show you what we built our budget on as far as enrollment goes. And you'll see this eventually as I go over the enrollment projections, etc. So for this year's budget, we actually built our budget on 10,670. You can see down at the bottom here in green with the red arrow. Average daily members. That's the average seat time. Kids come into the school district, students leave the school district, and we had planned on an average of 10,670 students. So that's what we initially built our budget on a year ago. Remember, we started all this before COVID, and COVID-19, of course, came in the end of March of last year, beginning of April. And we decided that we would make the adjustments in the new fiscal year. And so kind of that's what we're doing right now. So we originally planned on 10,670 students, average daily membership students. And where we're at right now is 10,307.56. So as you can see, that's a decrease of about 332, 333 students. Now, as you remember, each student comes with dollars, either levy dollars from our stakeholders or state aid from from the state. So again, we're going to have to make an adjustment for that 332, almost 333 less students. And so what I'm doing here, and I'll go over this with you. Remember, this is the general fund, Fund 1, and some of the adjustments we're going to make, admission and student activities, again, because we've had less activities during COVID, about a decrease of 64,400. Medical assistance is going down. The interest revenue, the interest rates have declined substantially since a year ago. So we're looking at a decrease in revenue about 275,000. Rent school facilities, again, because of COVID, we have not, had a lot of school rent coming in like we normally would. As I told you before, each of the students' ADMs comes with a formula amount, and so because of that loss of students, we're looking at about a $1.4 million decrease in revenue there. Again, when you take a look at all the different pieces of that decrease in ADMs, we have to lower our budget by almost $2 million. The good news here is that we did have some federal dollar grant dollars coming into us for the COVID, and so that grant equaled almost $3.4 million, and we were able to get a Washington County CRF COVID grant also as well, and that's about $287,000. So we started the original budget with about $155 million worth of revenue, and with the adjustments here in January, we're projecting at this point in time to be around $156,500,000 with those revenue adjustments. With the expenditures, again, we were planning on spending down some of our fund balance, and so we originally started with about almost $157 million worth of expenses, and which is almost about almost $1.7 million revenue or expenditures over revenues. Right now, in January, what we're actually doing is we're looking at, because some things we spent these federal grant dollars down, we had to do so by December 31st of 2020. And so the good news here with these dollars, we were able to do some really good things here with it. The various supplies here and equipment, these actually went towards our one-to-one devices, etc. So it was pretty cool that we were able to buy those devices and in a time when we need them. So right now, with those additions, and these are, like I said, these are all grant dollars. It's about a $160 million budget. And so right now we're looking at about a $3.6 million expenditure over revenues. And again, like I said, we'll also be doing an updated budget revision in May when we get more and more better information. There is about 8 funds in the district, and we're going to adjust 3 of them tonight. And the second fund we're going to take a look at is Fund 2, which is nutrition services. Again, this was before COVID hit, and way back when we developed our original budget, we thought we would have about $7.8 million worth of revenues and about $7.45 million worth of expenditures. So we were looking at revenues exceeding expenditures by about $352,000 originally. So when we had when we made all the adjustments to food service, and you have to remember, we've done distance learning, we've done hybrid learning, and now the students are coming back. And so we're about 60% free and reduced in the district. Paula Polkamp, who's our nutrition services director, has done a phenomenal job of taking us through this COVID time with providing food. She got a grant from the state of Minnesota, or from MDE in the state of Minnesota, for $883,000. This grant was used to do universal feeding for adults in our school district. And also, again, remember, a lot of these revenues have went down because we don't have kids in the schools. And again, her and Travis, our accounting coordinator, have kind of adjusted the numbers. And so when you look at the revenues being adjusted, we're going from 7.8 million down to about 6.7 million, a reduction of about 1.1 million in revenues. And when you look at the expenditures and those adjustments, we're looking at going from 7.45 million in expenditures to about 6.7 million in expenditures. So right now we're projecting kind of a break-even analysis, a break-even point, about $40,000 worth of revenue over expenditures. And again, hats off to Paula and her staff. They've done a marvelous job providing food during this COVID time. The last fund I'd like to show here with revisions is the Fund 4, which is our Community Service Fund. Again, you can kind of see here that we've had to make some adjustments revenue-wise. We're looking at about a $900,000 decrease in the General Community Ed Fund. Again, because we bring in about $1.7 million during a year in our Adventure Connection, which is our before and after school program, daycare program. With not having kids during this time, we've lost revenue. Also, classes have had to be done online, and our rentals for our facilities have obviously dropped considerably during COVID. So we originally started out with about 10.3 million in revenues. And with those adjustments, we're looking at about 9.9 in the January revised budget. Originally, we had planned on about $10.4 million in community service expenditures. And with the adjustments, we're looking at about $10.1 million. So we're looking right now with expenditures being over revenues of about $212,000. Again, COVID has kind of really hit school districts hard. We're not alone on this. With the reduction in enrollment, as you'll see, most metropolitan public school districts have seen similar, if not the same types of things that we're going through right now. I want to talk a little bit now about enrollment. And you saw that, I showed you from what we built our budget on to what our budget is students are currently at. We do a building count. Each of the schools actually does a building count. And I do my enrollment projections. I have a model that I built, and I use this kind of as a foundation and kind of a checking point. This enrollment report comes out from Teaching and Learning every month at the end of the month, beginning of the next month. This one is actually our most recent enrollment report at the end of December, before the holiday break. As you can see down here in yellow, overall, according to our building and program counts, we're down about 354 kids, or about 3.36%. So as I take a look and put those in my model, a couple things happen. So you can kind of see there's that 10,337.57 number that I showed you earlier. The number of students that we're expecting to have in place this year. And then I'd like to kind of take a look at next year. You can kind of see right now, the model is actually showing us to decrease students again from 10,337 to about 10,175. Now keep in mind, and I'll make this point in our assumption, you can kind of see here that our pre-K is going down from about 102 ADMs to about 32. So there's about an 80 ADM decrease in our pre-K program. And that'll be one of our assumptions. We're assuming that the pre-K grants that we got for our 9 elementaries, only 2 are grandfathered in. The other 7 were just for a 2-year basis. And with the state, hurting also financially, we're just making assumptions that they are not going to renew that pre-K grant for us for those additional 7 sections that we've had. So you can kind of see what's happening through the years. Again, we're looking at slight declines. Again, we'll have to monitor this. I usually look at only 1 or 2 years ahead, just simply because numbers can change and then they impact obviously later enrollment projections. But right now, we are looking at a slight decline. We were looking, as you can see here, we were looking at an increase after a 10-year decrease. Our numbers started here in 2018 to go up. If you remember right, last year we had projected about 10,630, I think, and we ended up with 10,562. Now, remember, we were going to go up. We had projected a 40 kid increase for this year to that 10,670 that I showed you before. So looking at that, we are looking at about 80 of those kids are pre-K out of that number. So we're looking at some initial budget assumptions being enrollment decrease of about 162.5 ADMs from this year to next year. Again, remember, 80 of which are pre-K. So again, we're looking at early childhood to grade 12. We're looking at about an 80 ADM decrease when you take into account 80 of those are pre-K. Again, I did comment that the pre-K supplemental grant, we're assuming it's not going to be renewed. That's $750,000 that we received that we will, we're assuming we will not receive because the state has used their dollars, used their fund balance considerably. We're looking at the state aid formula increase to be flat, be zero for the next 2 years. My peers are also, as I talk to my peers, they're also assuming that this is going to happen. Keep in mind that the last 4 years, we've received a 2% increase in the funding formula each year, which has really helped us out. Because of universal feeding, parents have not filled out the free and reduced forms, and our compensatory revenue, of which we have about 10.75 million this year. If you were going to look at our report for next year, it drops $5 million. It goes down from 10.7 to 5.7. Now, again, remember, compensatory revenue is determined by our free and reduced count. Our free and reduced count is right around 56%. And again, because compensatory revenue is determined from free and reduced and the forms that our families have turned in and qualified for free and reduced, because of the universal feeding, because we've been feeding everyone, again, our compensatory revenue for next year shows 5.7 million. And so we're assuming, and we've heard that there's going to be some form of state legislation, hopefully to hold the compensatory revenue harmless. So we're assuming that since we had 10.7 million this year, we're going to get 10.7 million again. Otherwise, we'd see a $5 million hit. And that's just not our school district. This is across the state of Minnesota. The free and reduced counts have went down significantly because of the universal feeding program. Special education revenue will increase by 4%. Again, besides that CRF grant that you saw during the budget adjustment, we received about $2 million in CARES money, which is another COVID grant. And we have until December 31st of 2022 to spend that. And some of those dollars can only be used for COVID-related things, and some of them, as we can offset some costs, we will to help with any budget adjustments that we're going to need. We do 80% of our own transporting in the district, and again, we have about 20% of our special services transportation is done by First Student or by Type 3 van vendors. And so we're looking right now at about a 2.5 increase in that contract for next year. And then the utilities, overall, we're looking at between, let's say, electricity and natural gas, water, sewer. We're looking at about an overall 3% increase in those items versus from trend. So Again, we are going to see some as we build these buildings, and as we put in new lighting, LED lighting fixtures. We're also doing that at Tartan Arena, and it has been done at Puller Arena. It has shown a significant decrease in our electrical bill. So with that, I will answer any questions.
If I could add a little comment here as well.
Sure.
I just happened to get a text from another superintendent, and he's like, check your email, which I just did. And the new ESSER allocations have come out in federal dollars, and our district is getting $6 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that I was not expecting. We just found out, literally, the email came out at like 5:02 while Randy was presenting, and another superintendent was calling me. I'm like, I can't text right now. He says, check your email. Yeah. That is going to have a huge impact in mitigating potential cuts that we would be facing this year, because we would be looking at potentially laying off staff and with the drop in enrollment. And one of the things that's important to understand is that what we don't know, normally every year when we do a budget assumption, and for those who are new, every year in January, Randy puts together our budget assumptions. And that's basically one of the challenges in school funding is that this legislature doesn't wrap up until the end of May. And however, we have to plan our budget in January for the following school year. We can't wait until the summer to decide what our budget looks like. And so we always have to, the legislature provides new funding every 2 years for a 2-year cycle. And so on these years like ours right now, where it's a funding year, we don't know what they're going to do, right? And we always hope that, a basic 2% and 2% in the formula is likely keeping pace with inflation. It doesn't do a whole lot for us, but it's better than nothing. And every year that it's a legislative funding year is a gambling session. We have to decide, what are we going to predict they're going to give us? And so Randy and I have talked a lot about this, and a lot of our business directors and other districts are as well. Do we make an assumption we feel like it's a year we probably have to assume 0. And if we do better than that, it's good. It'd be great. But given the state of the economic state of the state of Minnesota and our country and our world right now, it's not a year that we're expecting the state to have a huge budget surplus where they're going to, hand over more money to schools. And so we have to always decide, how much do we predict? And Randy does a great job of this. How much are we going to spend in roll-up costs for salaries and steps and lanes increases? What are we going to expend for utility costs for next year? How much is energy going to go up next year? All these things are what go into the budget assumptions where we start planning in January. And from that point forward, we have to make decisions. If our budget's going to take a hit because of some of the assumptions we're making, then we have to actually consider by spring if we're going to have to lay off any staff. And we have to tell people by April.
For the newcomers, just to kind of put in a point, from these assumptions, I have a projection model that I developed that goes 5 years into the future, and we put these assumptions in the student numbers, et cetera. And so I'm in the process right now of developing that, and we'll have that here shortly, so that we can see with these assumptions and all the student enrollments that we have, et cetera, we can project then what our revenues and our expenditures will be for next year.
Right, and Randy does an amazing job.
Yeah, so whether or not, and then it also goes into the future. So that helps us with our, if we have to do any budget adjustments, or if we have any budget initiatives that we want to do. So it's not just a negative thing, it also can be positive. And when I first came to the district, this is my 7th year, when I first came to the district, I know the current board members remember this, we had to do a $8 million budget reduction. So that's what I got, we got to come into. And since then, we passed a levy. Christine and the board have done a great job passing an operating referendum, et cetera. And we haven't had to do budget adjustments for 6 years, probably. Yeah.
So one of the challenges this current year, normally we can look at our enrollment trends and we can figure out, okay, is our enrollment trending up, down, is it looking stable? Because we've lost a lot of enrollment to private sector this year, what we don't know is how many will come back when COVID is over with. It's not just our district, it's across the entire state of Minnesota. And so 2 things that we're advocating for with the legislature this year is hold us harmless on our drop in enrollment, because every your enrollment for this year is what determines your budget allocation for next year from the state. But with so many, we've lost, almost 400 students. It's really hard to, if we have that huge of a hit, it's going to really affect our bottom line. But the other piece that Randy mentioned is we also get funding for our students who fall below the poverty line. So the way we measure that is by those free and reduced lunch forms. Well, nobody's filling them out this year because the feds are providing free meals for everybody during COVID. And so what it basically does is it takes away our ability to get a measure, a good data point on what our poverty rate is. And so that's the other piece we're really advocating, that the legislature hold us harmless and use the year before's data for free and reduced lunch counts, because that will hopefully be more accurate than what we're getting this year, because this year people aren't, why would you fill out the form if you're getting a free meal anyway? So that's really a tricky piece for us. But this is where that ESSER money, this new money that we just found out about, one of the questions we have is, do we decide that it's too uncertain whether these are real changes in our enrollment or if temporary? And if we know we're going to have to make some cuts, do we use this as a one-time chance to dig into our fund balance, which is like our savings account, and not cut all the staff this year and wait and see if those kids do come back next year? If they don't, then we do the deeper dive budget cut to right size according to our student enrollment. And, Randy and I and our cabinet have been chatting about that. Is this the year that we do some of that? We always build up fund balance. We've been doing that for a long time. I know I've been here 6 years, and when I first got here, we had a fund balance of 1.5%. Our board policy is now 8 to 10%, and we're now well above that, which is great. But there's a reason you want to have a fund balance when you've hit dire times. And so this is one of those conversations we're having right now. Is this a year where we want to dip into fund balance so that we avoid cuts, because we're not sure if these are real enrollment losses or temporary? But this ESSER new money that we're getting will help us so much with that as well, because one of the problems, sorry.
I was going to say, I hope the funds, like I said, the COVID funds, we got enough COVID supplies and everything. We need the dollars to help us bridge, current expenditures. And hopefully that 6 million will help us do that.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be learning more about that in the coming days. But I'll just say this as well. We have to figure out, like, one of the problems with cutting staff and laying off staff is once they're gone, they're hard to get back. And there are particular areas where it's very hard to fill. For example, special education teachers are very hard to find. Math and science teachers, if we lay people off, we're going to have a hard time getting them back if we say, oh, wait, actually our enrollment came back. So it's even bus drivers. If we lay off bus drivers, we're going to have a really hard time. We already have a hard time filling vacancies. So it's kind of a gamble, right? In a normal year, if we knew this was real enrollment loss, then we would obviously right size our staffing for it. But in a year like this, where it might be temporary and we think people will come back, that's the hard part, because it's really hard to staff once you cut people. So those are the conversations we're going to be having in the coming months.
So Christine, can I just say one comment? The state, unlike the federal government, has to balance its budget.
Right. Yep.
So we'll be lucky
if
they don't cut
right
funds to school.
Yep.
So the Senate is in the hands of some very conservative people.
Right.
And so I'm concerned about that. I want to make that point. And the other point I want to make is, the private schools, they don't have the capacity to handle, too many more kids, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know.
They have hired so many people this year.
Yeah.
Many new teachers, and they are booming. They are thrilled. And I always say, this is their year, and they are booming, and they're hiring people left and right, renting additional spaces. They're really booming. And it's not just in our area, it's across the state.
Hill Murray has seen a 25% increase in their enrollment since last year.
Interesting. Because they've been crowded before. I don't know. I'm just interesting. That whole capacity question, I think, is
right. But more students promotes the opportunity to rent or buy more space or add on. I mean, once you have more students, you have more funds and you can do more things with it. So they're certainly not slowing down in their recruitment efforts at all.
Yeah, or turning people away. Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Michelle, could I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, sure.
So from the 50,000 foot view, and partly for the benefit also of for me, but also for the new board members. Are you sort of developing parallel silos of assumptions as we finish our construction on new buildings and start tearing buildings down? I mean, that will have an impact on some of our transportation costs. I suppose right now with new boundaries, we don't know if the transportation costs will go up a little bit or down a little bit. But it would seem to me that as we get some more efficiencies of scale, this horror story of laying off people the real right sizing might be in the redistribution of staff as well. So just to kind of remind the new board members that we've got this entire parallel path of new construction and stuff going on as well.
If I could add to that, what you're saying, Steve, is exactly right on. Not this spring, but next spring, we are closing schools and we're going to be consolidating, going from 14 traditional schools to 11. Bigger schools will have some efficiencies of scale by all means. And so that's another reason that we want to ask ourselves, is this the year that we temporarily dip into our savings to hang on to people until we really know how many we need to keep next year when we right size our district a little better? There's inefficiencies when you're running smaller schools. There's inefficiencies in operating costs and staffing. And so that's another $1 million question. We're not like everyone else either. We have a major change coming on the horizon that will be taking place next year at this time. We're already in conversations with our teachers union and our principals union and other groups about all of the bidding process that's going to be happening a year from now in the winter time. And we'll have a better sense then about, is the enrollment here to stay? Is it gone? What's the real enrollment going to feel like? And how does that fit better? We're going to have so much more ability to be efficient in our operating costs. It's really exciting.
Yeah, my initial impression, without any facts, which is how I usually speak, but my initial impression is that another reason why this might be a good year to use some of our reserve fund to keep that staff is not only so that we have the right people available when we need them, but it kind of sends a mixed message that we built these new schools, we got this money, and now we're laying off staff. It's kind of a hard public position to take, and it would be tough to lay off the teachers that we then can't rehire as we move into those new buildings.
And and Steve, I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with you on that. I also believe that our by building new buildings and having all this wonderful new classroom spaces available, we should do better with enrollment over time now because we have beautiful spaces for students and families to enroll in. So we're very hopeful that this dip we're facing in enrollment is temporary this year, but we should be very stable going forward after that. The question is, Randy and I were talking, do we bank on half of them coming back, a third, 2/3? And we don't know, because who's ever lived through a pandemic before? And every business director in the metro is having the same conversations right now.
And that's a good point too, because it just occurred to me that part of this discussion also, another reason to keep the teachers, but part of this discussion also is the reintroduction of those students back into our buildings, into a structured educational process, and then trying to deal with some of the mental health adjustments that we'll need to accommodate as some of the students come back into the system and stuff. So I think that's another reason, I think, to see if we can retain as much of our staff as possible, that we could afford to do anyway.
Agreed. And I think that's the $1 million question, literally the $1 million question, or more millions. But I think that we're in such an unusual year. It's so hard, and Randy's enrollment projections have been spot on year after year after year. But who has a crystal ball right now? That's so difficult. But traditionally, he can tell us this is what we expect next year. And he looks at live births and density of neighborhoods and all these things and has a data point for us to look at. And right now, it's a little bit of a gamble because we're not quite sure how many are going to come back.
Yeah, the COVID impact, you just don't know, so it's, that's why you have to adjust as you move forward. It's just, plan for the worst, expect the best, but it is right now, it's unlike anything. I've been in this position for 22 years. I've been in this occupation for 22, and this is by far the most interesting, challenging budget building process for 21-22 that I've ever seen, actually.
Christine and Randy, I think they'll come back. I mean, we have so much to brag about.
I agree.
Our beautiful new schools and our excellent staff and our science labs and our computers and what, I mean, I can remember, I mean, my kids are grown now, but touring area private schools being very disappointed. What is that? Very disappointed.
Just getting a little echo on your voice, no worries.
You know, in their facilities and their staffing levels and all the rest. I mean, we are competitive. We are competitive, and people will see that and they'll come back, I think.
If you remember also the enrollment demographic study that Hazel Reinhardt did that we just looked at here, a couple months ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, I guess, showed us, you know, somewhat being, you know, flat enrollment. And
very stable though.
Yeah, very stable. So that was what my projection, if you remember, before this whole COVID thing, you know, we were looking at flat enrollment, or, you know, like what we had budgeted for this year was a 40 kid increase from last year, you know, based upon previous enrollment projections. And of course, obviously the COVID-19 factor hit us, and now, you know, that's in there, and, you know, what are we going to see? You know, what's going to happen? You know.
Michelle, I have a question.
Great, go ahead.
So based on what Randy presented, it looks like the projected enrollment is going to go down the next 5 years. But a few minutes ago, we talked about the application to MDE for the K-12 online education, and that was not factored in. Are we assuming that?
That was not factored in, no.
Are we assuming that? I'm assuming that the application is gonna be accepted. But do we have a way of knowing how many kids we're gonna bring in after that starts, and when it's gonna be approved, and so forth?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We are hopeful that application will be approved by this spring. We are already able to provide online courses, and we were before COVID. And we actually have gotten a really nice additions to our course catalog to really add to our existing classes that we can offer. So that's happening. We know that, as Josh mentioned earlier, we have over 200 students that live in District 622 boundaries who open enroll to online programs. This is before COVID. So we already know there's a potential right there for easily a couple of hundred students. But that doesn't even count all those who are homeschooled. For me, if I'm homeschooling my child and there's an online option, I think I would easily want to enroll them in an online option so that I don't have to do all the curriculum work as a parent, right? So I think there's a whole nother market there among our homeschooled families. And then, of course, that doesn't even begin to talk about families who live outside of our district boundaries who might decide to open enroll into our district because of our online options. This, by the way, application is very difficult to complete. In fact, in my conversations with metro area superintendents, most have thought about it because in COVID, we've all gotten some experience with online programming, but most have said, nope, we're not going through with it at this time. It's too much, it's too complicated, it's too difficult, and our team plowed ahead. And so I think we have the ability to become a front runner in that. Right now, the only school district in the metro that's really advanced in their online programming is Minnetonka Public Schools, and they're far in the West Metro, and they have incredible enrollment. There are students, for example, who attend class in our district or in Matamidi, and they enroll in classes in Minnetonka because it's online, and they have a very expansive course catalog. And so we're trying to build a really top of the line program. So you're right, Charlotte, that will potentially bring students back. And one thing you should know, and I value this in Randy's leadership for finances, is that he budgets conservatively. We believe there will be extra students who will come in, and we believe it will help, but we also don't want to assume it will happen until we see those numbers. We often refer to it as cheeks in the seats. You know, your butt cheeks in the seats. We don't know you're there until we see you show up. And one thing Randy's been really good about is let's not assume we're going to get them until we have them. And so we want to be planful about the budget we think we're going to have. And if we end up with more students and our budget is better off, which has been what's happening year after year, that's okay too. But we'd rather not make the assumption and then have them not show up. And then we all of a sudden got ourselves into trouble financially by assuming that.
On that one, we need some trend data. So how many additional students we would attract that aren't currently in our buildings at this point? We have to start from somewhere. So yeah. So this actual application will help us provide online courses outside of our district for students outside of our district. Right now, what we do is, current students will either take an online class or be in the classroom, and we don't get any additional revenue from that happening. But we will get additional revenue if current resident students that are open enrolled somewhere else or students outside of our district now take online classes. That will generate additional revenue.
Another layer of this is if you think about, and especially Charlotte, your kids have come up through our school system. Julia, yours are babies, but maybe you remember even when you were in high school, you enroll in classes that are available, right? One of the things that happens, and this gets to your earlier question, Charlotte, about staffing and having enough teachers. So we put out the course catalog every January, students register. If not enough students register for a class, we may cancel it. There's all kinds of really cool classes, electives and what have you. But if we don't get enough students enrolled in it, we may have to cancel the course because you need to have at least, and you see this probably at the university level too, if you didn't have enough students enrolled in it, it wouldn't be viable to pay the teacher for that class period. And so one of the beautiful things about online is we have Tartan and we have North. Let's say we offer a course, but not enough Tartan students enroll, but not enough Norths enroll. And normally they'd cancel it. But together, they may have enough to form the course and keep it going because they can do it online and a teacher from either side could teach it and students could be jointly enrolled. And so one of the goals we have eventually, right now we have a Tartan course catalog and a North course catalog. Our dream is to eventually get to a 622 course catalog. And that will allow us to be able to publish courses that may or may not be taught by a North teacher or a Tartan teacher, depending on who enrolls in it. And how we organize our staffing allocations, but it's a wonderful opportunity. And the other thing that we're banking on that might help us, and Charlotte and Julia weren't here last month when we first brought this up, but we're doing some exploratory work right now to look into whether or not we want to open language immersion programs. And my background for many, many, many years before I came to this district was building immersion programs. So I know the work very well. We don't have any in District 622. And I know when I was a 622 parent, as a young parent, I drove my kids to St. Paul for 7 years straight because of an immersion program experience I wanted them to have. So that's another conversation we're having. And it could draw significant enrollment or certainly maintain enrollment that might otherwise choose to leave. So we're always being proactive about it because enrollment is our bread and butter. How we fund ourselves and the ability to do more by hanging on to our enrollment. We lose thousands of students to enrollment elsewhere that live in our district. Our dream is not necessarily to borrow students from other districts, but let's keep our own students here. Let's offer what they need so they don't feel the need to go elsewhere for school. That's our dream.
Has the hold harmless been passed yet? And if not, what evidence do we have that it's going to pass?
None. It hasn't passed. What I would recommend, and I'll be happy to share with you, names and contact information. This is the time to reach out to legislators. And I'd be happy to connect with each of you about how to do that, where to send the information, who to talk to. But one of the great things in 622, our locally elected officials are super supportive of it. They're not the ones who have to be swayed. Typically, it's legislators in other counties that aren't serving our school district, because we have pretty progressive elected officials in our school district. And so they're very much in favor of it. Senator Uyghur has been a big proponent, and Nancy knows because she works with him, of helping us get that underway. And he always reaches out for advice before he's out going on the floor to talk about stuff on the Senate floor. And we just need to really get that word out there. It's a time, if nothing else, to try to hold us harmless.
Hopefully at least the compensatory revenue.
And compensatory is the one that's tied to the free and reduced lunch forms, to your poverty rate. And that makes a lot of sense because nobody has
Yep.
any accurate data about free and reduced this year because everybody in the state had been given free meals for their kids.
I'd be happy to write or contact or whatever needs to happen.
Wonderful.
I kind of find it ridiculous that.
Absolutely. And likewise, for any of you who get really interested in legislative advocacy, we do get opportunities to go testify. And I'm certain if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know. I can make sure to get you connected to that world as well.
Thanks, everyone.
That was really delightful to
sorry.
be able to drop that little $6 million bomb on this presentation while you're in the middle of it, Randy. That was pretty fun.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll forward you it.
Yeah.
The info.
Hey, Randy, one of the budgets you shared was community ed. And
Yes.
I've been kind of curious about what the kind of short-term plan with community ed is.
As far as,
Well, are there any changes happening with community ed immediately?
I believe so. Christine, maybe you can, I do know she's expecting a loss of revenue, and so I think she is making some reductions to her budget as you saw there. So, you know, and again, some of those costs are being absorbed by CRF funds or the CARES money to help out to keep, you know, those programs going that, you know, we have to. So, but
So I can add to that. Just for those who are new as well and those who've been around, community education. By the way, the state of Minnesota is one of the biggest proponents of community education among all 50 states. Many other states do not fund community education at all in the way that our state values and puts resources into community education. That said, our community education in our district, it's basically, we talk about, I keep trying to find a better way to say this with Cheryl Geisberg, who oversees our senior citizen programming, but birth to grave, birth to death, there's got to be a more PC way to say that, right? But we have, from the youngest days, our community education helps us to oversee early childhood programming. So our 4-year-old programming and all the preschool stuff is under community education. Community education also oversees driver's education programming, lots of different camps, aquatics. They oversee all of our building facilities rentals when other groups want to rent our buildings or our ice rinks or what have you. And then programming our adult basic education. So our ESL classes for adult immigrants and our GED classes. We are the largest GED testing provider in the state of Minnesota, even bigger than Minneapolis and St. Paul. We're a huge adult basic education. That's all under community education. And then programming for adults and senior citizens. We have many senior citizens who come into Gladstone and they come in to play cards and bingo and different things like that. And many classes offered. And I will tell you, this group has pivoted. One of the problems with community education during COVID times is they are fee generated. Large portions of their budget are based on whether they can draw in fees, like people who want to take swimming lessons or driver's education classes, or even the adults who want to sign up for classes and programming. It's very much fee based. And so, even when we rent our buildings, like a private club sport wants to rent our gymnasiums for a basketball tournament or something. Well, with COVID, all of those things have disappeared, right? People want to rent our pools. They want to rent our ice rinks. So many things under COVID times have disappeared, and they have been hit harder than anyone else in terms of funding. They also provide our school age care program, the before and after school care.
That's a huge one.
And they get fees. People paid money for that daycare program. And one thing that happened during COVID is the state said schools must provide that for free to certain categories of families. Well, all of a sudden it dried up other funds they would have collected, but then they still also had, with their extra classes, swimming lessons, what have you, they could just lay off staff, but they couldn't lay off the childcare providers because the state said we had to provide childcare, but then they couldn't collect the fees for it either. So it's a really good question about community education, because community education, and I'm glad you brought that up, Michelle, is that community education is one that's been really hit by COVID in a way that many of our other areas haven't been hit because they're not subsidized by the state as much. And so they are considering whether they can stay afloat they had some fund balance built up. They've done a really good job there as well. but there's a potential that they're going to have to lay off some staff if we don't get over COVID sooner rather than later.
The hard part about this also is that Adventure Connection, like I mentioned earlier, generates about $1.7 million on a normal year. And those dollars are used to offset some of the other programs that don't, subsidize some of those other programs that we offer for, a lower fee, et cetera. So with those dollars not coming in, it looks like we'll probably do somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 in Adventure Connection. So that's a $900,000 hit. So,
Adventure Connection, for those who are new, that's our before and after school child program for school age child care. Yep. And I'll tell you, that group has been amazing. They've put a lot of classes online. Josh, who does our technology and communications, has helped them because when they tried to get kids, adults, seniors playing cards online, our district filter kept flagging them, as potential gambling sites. So Josh worked with them to figure out which ones wouldn't be, to unfilter some of them so that they wouldn't be blocked. But they've had seniors playing cards and bingo online because they can't get together, especially that's such a group that's at risk for COVID exposure. So they've done an amazing job.
Hey, Christine.
All right.
One quick question. Has the district been contacted at all about being a vaccination site or anything? Is there any progress in that? You're on mute.
Great question, Steve. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm going to talk about COVID in just a minute. But right now, what's happening with vaccinations is that each county in Minnesota is handling vaccinations. And so we superintendents all talk to each other. The Ramsey and Washington County folks have not talked much yet about school staff vaccinations, but some of the others, Bloomington and Anoka, for example, have. So we're gleaning from their communication to their superintendents what's coming. But yes, we are expected that we will be vaccination sites. And one of the words out there right now is that they are going to try to enlist the help of our school nurses to help administer vaccinations to school staff. Which will be a great segue to our COVID conversation next, if you want to talk about that, if you want to jump to the next topic, Michelle.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Okay, I believe, thank you, Randy, for all of that information and for your leadership. I've told you guys this before, but Randy is amazingly accurate in his predictions. He's amazingly thoughtful in all of the systems he's built for projecting budgets. And this is just a year that is like nothing we've ever seen before. It's really hard to do the work the right way we're used to doing. So hang with us. It could be a wild ride. All right. I'm going to get to a COVID update, if you don't mind. I'll start with that. And then I have one other quick topic. I've been trying, as you know, to give you guys just regular updates on COVID-19 and how it impacts our school district. And so just so you guys know who are new to our board as well, typically what we do is we talk about something a little more in depth sometimes at the work study session. And then when we do the business meeting, we tend to give a little abbreviated version of it, maybe not quite as many questions and answers. We kind of make it a little more abbreviated, but you're always welcome to ask questions in that session as well too. This just gives you a reminder of what the state initially put out. They originally told us that schools would be basing our decisions to open or not on the 14-day case rate per 10,000 people. So at the beginning of late summer, we were looking at 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 50, or 50 or more. Which back then we were like thinking that 15 was high and then it was dropping. And then all of a sudden when we started seeing numbers get about 50, we're like, what? And here things got really crazy. So this gives you a little glimpse. And I've got the document that has all the counties on it, but I always just pull out Ramsey and Washington because we're in both. The data that comes from the Department of Health is on a 2-week lag. So what we have is not the most current numbers, but I'll share the next most current ones with you in a moment. But right now we're still looking at case rates in Ramsey as of the last official report, 43.97 and 44 for Washington. And as you can see, that basic guidance tells us that elementary is supposed to be in hybrid at this phase and middle and high school needs to stay in distance learning. And so the next slide, this is a website, and I'll share this with our newer board members because the rest of you have this already, but we also have, there's a professor at the University of Minnesota who's put together an amazing real-time data point. So I pulled that data just today based on Ramsey County. This is Ramsey County, and you can see that Ramsey County, the blue triangles are what are projections that MDH has already talked about or is about to talk about. The purple diamonds are those that they predict. This predicts will happen in the coming days. The black dots are existing data, but that have not yet been finalized by MDH. So what you can see here is, we're looking at still case rates in about that same orange range, which means basically elementary should be in hybrid and secondary in distance. Same thing for Washington, although Washington's a little bit higher. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about is, what we've been doing during this time right now. So you all know that back before winter break, the governor came out and MDE put out a recommendation that they wanted all elementary students to go back to school in person, that were able to do so regardless of county rates. Something I want you to understand about that information is that what they're telling us, I'm going to stop my share for a minute. What they're saying is that elementary students are not as contagious. They, yes, can catch the virus and they can transmit it, but at a much lower rate because they're smaller people and their respiratory systems are smaller. And they've done a lot of studies to look at like how much an elementary child is able to get the virus and give it to somebody else. And what they're finding is it's very, very low. They say that a student age 11 to 17 is twice as likely to transmit the COVID virus as somebody who's age 10 and under. For this reason, they have said, we want you to open schools and we want you to do it regardless of what your county case rate data looks like. So they did also say that we could not begin to open before Martin Luther King Day, and that when we do open, we can only bring in 3 grade bands at a time. So K1, 2, and then we had to wait 2 weeks before we bring in 3, 4, 5. Now, they did also allow us to bring in pre-K with that K1, 2. So the timeline that I'm showing you here, I'm going to get to this, back to this where I was at. Oops, here we go. So back to this timeline. Here's where we're at. And just so you know, part of what's really challenging about all this is that during the time where families were choosing distance learning or in person, we had to go back out to our families right before winter break. We went out to families and said, listen, if we're going back in person, do you still want your child to stay in distance learning? Or do you want them to be part of the in-person programming? And we had to, with all that data that came in from the families, this is what happened. We gave them a week to respond. Those that didn't respond, every one of our elementary principals and their teams, they worked between like the Christmas and New Year holiday, they were in. All of our elementary principals, we worked like the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st. I mean, I'm not kidding. This is the amount of work that went into making sure phone calls were made, class lists were organized. It's really challenging because one of the problems is we have to figure out who's going to teach which in-person classes and who's going to teach the online classes because the numbers have changed. So this is where we're at right now with everything. The state did allow us 5 planning days to use where we don't have to count it as lost enrollment or attendance for students. We used 2 of those, but you have to use it when you're changing a model, instructional model. We used 2 of those before in elementary and we had 3 left to use. So we did schedule 3 planning days, which are allowed to us, and we scheduled those. So this is what that calendar looks like for you right now. And the reason we put those in here is that there's a lot of, it's not just a teacher getting their classroom set up to teach in person. All the class lists are changing. Who they're assigned to, how this is working, it's all changing. It's not easy. It's been quite a nightmare, to be honest. And so there's been a lot of work that's going into it. Seesaw is the program that we're using for elementary school communication and elementary school lesson planning online for our students. In order to re-roster the students, we have to then have a Seesaw changeover and things like that. It's quite complicated, but this is where we're at. So basically pre-K to 2 will be coming back in person, full days, 5 days a week, January 25th. And beginning February 8th, grades 3 to 5 will be full-time back in person all day, every day. Now, granted, about 1/3 of our families are still choosing to keep their children home in distance learning only. We are hopeful. It's, one of the challenges with the governor putting that out to all of us is that we we're still expected to now bring our students back in person. We're also expected to serve the online students who choose to stay home. And we are given no additional funds to staff that per se. So it's not easy to have, there's no extra teachers available to do both. And so there's some efficiencies that are dramatically lost by having to do both. So that's what some of our challenges are right now. Next slide, if I can get it to click here. A couple things we're working on. PPE. The new guidance from the state is recommending teachers wear a mask and a face shield. By the way, they're telling us that the danger is not so much with students next to students, because again, what we said about the elementary age children, it's adults next to other adults and adults interacting with students. And so what they're recommending is that we no longer have to have 6 feet of distance between our elementary age students. They're recommending 3 feet when possible, but it's not required. But we are pulling together all kinds of different resources to kind of, because obviously if we're bringing everybody back, we have to be able to put them back into classrooms again. So Randy had a really great idea earlier this fall to buy air purifiers. These are wonderful machines. He bought a bunch of them with some of our earlier COVID dollars that came to us from the feds. And those air purifiers, each one of them sanitizes the air in the room up to 750 square feet. So every single classroom now in our district has air purifiers and instructional spaces, which is amazing. We're so excited about that. I don't know another district that has done that. So that's one assurance we can give to our teachers. Cleaning, we're continuing with all of our COVID cleaning and sanitizing, which includes a lot of kind of rethinking between groups of kids sitting down and sanitizing and all that, but continuing with that. Cohort planning. What they're saying is kids inside of one cohort can share materials. So inside of a classroom, they can share the classroom library set and things like that. But what they don't want is people between different classes mixing together and sharing materials. We want to keep our cohorts separate. So if somebody does get COVID, we can do better contact tracing that way. Breakfast and lunch, they do not want us serving all kids in the cafeteria at the same time. And if we do bring in groups together, they want us to have each group sit with your own class cohort and distance between each of the cohorts. So if we brought 2 classes into the lunchroom at the same time, we'd put them on opposite sides of the lunchroom and not sitting together. Breakfast, because breakfast happens all at the same time when the kids get off the buses. There's no way for them to sit in the cafeteria and eat because they're all arriving at the same time. So that's going to be grab and go. Kids are going to grab a breakfast and go to their classroom and eat it. Lunch, we're going to try to do in the cafeteria if we can space out those groups enough. And that's what we're planning. Recess is allowed, but we are trying to reduce the number of the kids on the playground at a time so that we don't have mixing of cohorts. So we're reworking all the recess schedules right now. Busing, there is no longer a rule that says you can't have a full bus anymore. However, there needs to be a plastic barrier between the driver and all the students sitting behind them. Because remember, it's the adults that we're really working in a different kind of way than students that are young at this time. We have had to change our busing schedule because in order to do our routes, we're a 4-tiered district, so we do 4 runs, each driver does, but we need a little time to clean those buses between each route. And so we can't have them 30 minutes apart. We're having to put them 40 minutes apart. The only way to do that is to move our middle schools to an earlier time and our latest elementary schools a little bit later. So there's going to be a span of the middle schools are going to start 15 minutes earlier. And our last elementary's pickup group is going to be 15 minutes later from 3:45 to 4 o'clock. That's not a popular topic among our teachers at those late start schools. But there really isn't another way around that right now because of the amount of time we need to have to be able to clean those buses. Quarantine students, if a student does, go ahead, yeah.
Can I just interrupt really quick? Charlotte, I noticed you put a question in the chat, and because of open meeting law, we're not allowed to use the chat. So if you have a question, we just kind of raise your hand and shout it out.
Oh yeah,
great. If you'd like, I think you could ask Christine.
Yeah, I'll pause, sure.
I'm sorry, I'm still learning the protocols.
Of course, no worries.
My question was, what are the cohort sizes?
Yeah, so our class sizes are pretty much on par with what they've been before. We typically have our class sizes in the low to mid 20s, depending on the grade level.
Cohort.
A cohort is a class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like if we have a school that has 3 third grade classrooms, We want to keep each third grade classroom as their own cohort. So we don't want those children all eating lunch and mixing up in the cafeteria together. You'll stay with your own cohort, your own third grade classroom. So you won't be intersecting as much with other students. Normally, all third grades go to lunch at the same time and you might sit with different kids. Not now. Right now, we're going to keep you with your homeroom class because that's your cohort for safety precautions. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So quarantine students, we've also had to think about when we bring our students back, but yet somebody has to go home and be quarantined. It could be because they have someone at school that exposed them, but that's unlikely. It's more likely somebody in their home has COVID and then that person is a close contact, so they need to stay home. What we're trying to work out is that the teachers who are going to teach the distance learning only kids, they would then serve the student who has to go home and be quarantined for a couple of weeks of school so that they aren't missing school. So they'd be able to jump into the distance learning plan at the time that they're home on quarantine. So it's all highly complicated, I can tell you, organizing all that. Another thing that has come with the governor's order is that every elementary school is going to have biweekly testing on site for staff. That means that we can't require any staff to take a test, but we will offer it at the school site every 2 weeks. And that is beginning next week, the 19th, right after MLK, that we'll have the first round of on-site testing for staff available. So that's another piece of this that helps at least with some of the prevention pieces.
Christine, I have a question.
Sure.
So obviously this is a very thought out list and kind of the logistics around it. Have the teachers had some input in this, and are they aware of what's going on, kind of the precautions and what you're working on?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. When we came together around the governor's order happened in December, right before winter break. One of the first things we did is there was a couple of options. We could come back in hybrid, which is part-time, or we could come back full-time. And because the order from the governor didn't tell us which one we had to do. And the challenge with coming back in hybrid and then moving to full-time is we would have to redo class lists again, like probably 2 times if we did 2 different models. And so we had a very an unusually large Zoom, but I called a Zoom on it. I think it was a Tuesday morning before winter break with every single elementary teacher on it. And then we used on the Zoom meeting feature, the poll anywhere. You can do the polls where you collect people's input. And we threw some of the challenging questions that we had in mind at them so they could weigh in on them. And so that's one way right away. We knew that this was something everybody would see. Now, one way to do it is we have meetings regularly, pretty much weekly with our teacher union leadership, which has been really helpful. And we've developed a really collaborative relationship over the years. That said, some teachers will say, well, just because they said this was a good idea, they didn't talk to me, you know how it is. Everybody's like, well, I wasn't in the room when the decision was made. So that's why we've gone to some really large Zooms where we would bring in everybody together to say, hey, you all get a chance to talk about this topic. We've done a number of those now. Also, every Wednesday night or every other Wednesday night, we've been having meetings with our COVID response team, which is a group of staff that includes a couple of members from every one of our union bargaining groups. So teachers, custodians, nutrition service workers, paraprofessionals, clerical, nurses, bus drivers, what have you. So we have a group that meets now every other Wednesday night where we take whatever ideas to make sure we run it by all these different groups so that they can go back and share with their bargaining groups. So we do a lot of interactive decision-making about everything. In fact, just today, one of the decisions that came up was about report cards for elementary teachers. There's going to be lists changing. So if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching 3rd grade, I might have some different students now that we go back in person than I had when we were doing all online. And so then the question was, but at the end of the trimester, which started in early December and ends the beginning of March, I may have students that I wasn't with for the whole trimester. How do I do their report card? So we came up with a few different options. And then we agreed that every principal, elementary principal this week is going to pull together their leadership team, which has representatives from all grade levels and teams, to float the 3 options and get their input so that we can decide which option is going to be the right one. So we're extremely collaborative in the way we decide things, to gather input along the way so people feel like they had a voice in the matter. So absolutely. And by the way, our elementary teachers overwhelmingly opted that they wanted to if we're going to come back, let's just go back in person and not do hybrid. And then a few weeks later, try to do in person, because then we'd have to reshuffle class lists again, which they felt would be more stressful for them. Now, that said, COVID still is a worrisome factor, and there's plenty of people who are concerned about it. So what we've been trying to do is just mitigate every step of the way, you know, what's happening and how we can help people feel safe in the work that we're doing. So, but yeah, it's challenging because, you know, that order came from the governor, and it was kind of like, well, we have to do it now. So we have to figure out how to move forward. So that's what we've been doing a lot of, is collaboration. So.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go back to, hang on. So
before you jump back in, Christine,
sure.
Could you say a little bit more about what kinds of things we're doing to just make teachers and staff feel confident about going back full time?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been doing is really every single group we've talked to is, oh, I forgot to mention this. We also bought 1,600 of these plexiglass trifold barriers that teachers can have with them too. So that, like, let's say a teacher pulls the kids up to the reading table. If I'm a teacher, I can put this plexiglass barrier around me so that I'm not face to face with students also. And we're sending 100 of those to every school site right now. I should have put that on the list as well. So that's been a really, that's been helpful. I've had paraprofessionals say to me, well, if I float between classrooms, I'm now going from one cohort to another cohort. And I'm like, you need one of these plexiglass shields that you carry with you everywhere you go. So whenever you sit to work with a student in another classroom, you're protected. So that's another example. But and I've also told staff repeatedly, and our staff, many bus drivers, custodians, teachers, paras, clerical, they all have my cell phone number. I always say, if an issue is bubbling up for you, just text me. Let me know what's going on so I know how to support you. But I've also said, if there's any PPE that you've heard of that exists that we haven't bought for you, let me know and we'll get it for you. Because new things are being invented all the time. I mean, it's amazing, new products coming out and things that we maybe haven't heard of. So does that help?
Yeah, definitely. I noticed at the last COVID meeting, the Wednesday night meeting, the head school nurse mentioned that, you know, there's already talk about getting teachers the vaccination, kind of like what Steve was getting at earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
But my heart kind of dropped when she said end of February, because I thought it was going to be like, they know already. Wow, this is great. They must be like just a couple weeks away, right, when kids are going to come back full time. But it didn't quite sync up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that month of time, or whatever amount of time it would be, that makes me a little bit concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But any more updates that you've heard from Alicia about the vaccine date or teachers' priority?
No, I'll say this. Every county is doing it a little bit differently, and that's what makes it tricky. Like, because we also have 2 counties that we're working with. There is word that among the first in-school staff that are going to be vaccinated are going to be school nurses. What the state has been telling us is that, like I said, the data, and actually Alicia, by the way, for those who are new, is our lead nurse, who's amazing, by the way. Alicia has looked at our own data, and our transmission rate at elementary school is nothing. It matches what they're saying in the data. Our Adventure Connection programs, where kids have been together all summer and all year in childcare, even when we're shut down, Adventure Connection is open. 0 transmission among students in those programs as well. So the data they're talking about with elementary age kids not being transmitters of the virus, I think is very true. And we've seen that in our own data. I think for me, what's more concerning is we're getting a lot of pressure to bring high school back right now. And without a vaccine, I'm more worried about that. Because, and Alicia and I, we've all talked a lot about this issue of elementary age kids. And staff, as they've looked at that data and our own data, have felt more and more comfortable knowing that you're not likely to get infected by an elementary age child, even if they take their mask off to eat their lunch. But you are more likely to get infected if you go to the staff lounge yourself and eat your lunch with all the other teachers and you don't take precautions. And so that's one of those things that we're trying to work on, is that right now the danger zone for elementary staff is very much each other, right? And so I think once we've been talking about that, people I think are feeling more and more comfortable about that. What we have told the state, by the way, initially put out a mandate that you would wear a mask and a face shield all day long. Well, last week they changed that to be just a recommendation. And I'll tell you, it's really tricky when they keep changing their mind about things. But one of the things that they have said is, and we've had teachers saying, oh my gosh, to teach in a mask and a face shield, how am I even going to speak to my students every day? Well, we've been working to get voice amplification systems in our schools and classrooms so that if they are speaking into a mask, they can be heard. For example, our PE teachers have asked for these, apparently there's these whistles that you don't have to blow in, you can push a button and it plays a sound. And I'm like, that's perfect. I never heard of that before, but that's great. You don't have to take your mask off to blow in a whistle, right? So all kinds of things like that are helpful. And I keep telling them, whatever you're learning about, tell us what they are so we can get them for you. But that is less worrisome to me based on what we've been seeing in the data and what the health department's been telling us. I will say this, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but we're getting a lot of pressure to open up high schools, middles and high schools. And yet the data says middle and high school students can transmit the virus at pretty high rates. And without the vaccinations, I'm really optimistic that by the end of February, we're going to start seeing lots of teachers getting vaccinated and staff. I hope we're going to prioritize those first and foremost, those that work with students with special needs who can't tolerate a mask very well. Those staff have got to be prioritized first because they're around students who don't wear masks. I would say also like elementary specialists, like a music or gym teacher or STEM teacher, because all classes in the building come to them for instruction. So they cross cohorts a lot. They need to be prioritized in that list. And we're going to be kind of working through those things as well. Those of us who work at the district ed center, we should be low on the list. There should no way should an administrator who's not in direct contact with kids be higher on the list than people who are direct contact, of course. So we're working on all of that, but it's amazing how much we think is going to probably be left to local control in that regard. But I do feel optimistic that that's going to come once they figure out some of this vaccination stuff. I do think it's going to start to come faster and faster once the systems get in better place. So I'm optimistic about that. So let me tell you a little bit about pressure points we're facing. In the elementary planning, a couple pressure points that, and I say this because these are the things as board members you might hear about, people are mad about or concerned about or worried about. So the first one is just, as I mentioned earlier, to staff in-person programming and online programming at the same time, we don't get extra funding to hire, like, yes, we get some temporary funding, but to hire a teacher and then lay them off is really tricky. A licensed teacher is not easy to find in the middle of the year. So what we've had to do, and we've got amazing grids laid out of how many students at every school by grade level, how many teachers we need to shuffle around, and that's really tricky. But what's happening is that we're having to change class lists around. We have a lot of upset parents about that because they're like, well, this has been my child's teacher all year, and all of a sudden they're not going to have that teacher anymore. Well, it's really tricky because you can't, if we kept everybody with who they were at, we would have some class sizes of 45 and some with 12 kids in them. And it's just not realistic if we're going to make this change. I already mentioned the school start times having to change. For those who were the 3:45 dismissal at elementary, they hated being the end of the day. And now they're got 4 o'clock dismissal and they hate it even more. And that's been tricky. When I was a school principal for many, many years, I was a 4 o'clock dismissal and I remember those days. It's not fun, but at the same time, we just really have to clean those buses and we can't really change that. Elementary specialists is another area. In an elementary school, typically all the teachers share a same license, right? So we can sift and sort the kids together about, I feel like I have to see your faces when I'm talking, so I have to stop sharing my screen. We can sift and sort the kids. So like if I've got, 100 elementary students in grade 1 and 2/3 of them want to be in person and 1/3 wants to be online, I can put one of the teachers as an online teacher and 2 of them are in person. It never works out evenly at every school, at every grade, the way you would like it to. So we've had to reshuffle some people, and that's been really tricky. We've had to bring some teachers who were online teachers back into the building because we need the building staff because we're now opening schools again. And so that's been tricky, trying to juggle all that. But when you think about specialists, and by specialists, I mean your music, your gym, and your STEM teacher. They're the ones in elementary schools right now that all of the classes go to, And that's when the teacher themselves gets their break, their preparation time for the day, when their class is with the specialists. But here's the problem. Every school only has one gym teacher, one music teacher, and one STEM teacher. But now we've got some kids online and some in person. What do you do with the specialists? So this is another example where we had a big meeting with a bunch of specialists last week. There's a couple ways we could do it. In the new system, with 1/3 of your class is not there in person, you basically have 1/3 of your hours free because there's no class in person to see. And that could be your time to push out lessons to the people online. Many specialists have felt like that's really hard to do both. So we said, okay, the other option is we take 2 specialists out of the whole system and put them online, and the rest of you move between buildings to cover those in-person classes. So we laid out different options, and they're working that through right now. And we've come up with some really good solutions where some district levels, and we're going to pay a few teachers to push the lessons out to all the music kids, and then take the burden off those who are trying to do both. But that's an area that's been a pressure point for elementary, is that specialists, because they have different licensure areas. Okay, so the class reassignments I told you about, there's a couple places where that's really hard on families. They're like, my child is staying in distance learning, but I want my child to have the same distance learning teacher they used to have, but we need that person to come back in person, and it's tricky. Meal times is tricky as well, because we're trying to, a lot of elementary teachers would prefer not to have kids eating in their classrooms because they worry about bugs and, crumbs and whatever, and it's easier to clean up a cafeteria than a classroom. And so we're really trying to work that out at lunchtimes and have staggered times and all that, but it's a tricky schedule change to make.
Christine.
Yes.
Can I ask about the dismissal time?
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen that on the news that sports have started in January. I think they started like this week.
Right.
And so with late dismissal, how are you dealing with in regards to basically scheduling competitions with other neighboring school districts that might not have the same dismissal like us, and so forth and so forth. So how is that going to work?
So that's not a problem for us, because our early schools are middles and high schools. Our late schools are elementary schools that don't compete. They don't have the athletics program. So that's not a problem for us.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, great question. So these were elementary pressure points. I'm just going to jump to secondary pressure points. And I say this because we are getting a lot of, and Michelle knows this because we've had parent emails and calls about when are we opening our high schools back up again? So a couple things we're thinking about. We have not gotten very clear guidance from the state yet. The state says for secondary, we're still supposed to look at county level COVID rates. The second thing that's really challenging is in a secondary school, everybody has different licensure areas. So it's not like elementary where we can say, okay, you're going to do the online classes and you're going to teach the kids in person. We only have certain teachers that teach calculus, for example. And if not very many kids are online or the other way around, we have to figure out how to staff that. It's much, much more complicated. One of the things that made our program more difficult than even our neighboring districts is that in our district, in 622, we've had over 50% of our secondary students choosing online only. And that's very different. People say, well, Matamita is open full time, or Matamita is doing this. Well, Matamita only had like 10% of their students choosing online. So it's a very different staffing situation. So we're trying to figure all that out. We know that in our district, we have trimesters, not semesters. And our next trimester ends around March 10th or so, which is before spring break, right around spring break time. It would be really challenging to bring our students back before the trimester because they might have to change teachers and such. And so that would be a natural time to look forward to possibly making that transition. But there's a lot of pressure to come back sooner than that. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, staffing in-person and online programs is really tricky. And also we already have heard that COVID transmission among teenagers is much, much, much higher. And, in an elementary school with 500 students, let's say a third stay home and you only have 350 students in the school. Well, bringing back kids to 16 or 1700 students in a high school is very, very densely populated situation. And without a vaccine and without any really dramatic drops in data, COVID transmission data, it's tricky. There's a lot of pressure though from folks to bring them back sooner rather than later. And that's what we're going to have to figure out. I literally have been in text with neighboring districts, and I have a couple meetings this week to see what everybody else is starting to think about, but everyone's been working to get their elementaries up and running. But we don't have a date yet for that, but there's a lot of pressure growing about that. So with that, and I know we've already done some of the comments along the way, but if anybody has additional questions about that, in fact, I'm getting a text from a neighboring district right now. Yeah, I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Washington County superintendents at 7:30 in the morning. And then I've got all the metro area superintendents. We meet again on Friday morning at 7:30. So we're going to, a lot of times in the Zoom, we do a poll to say, what's everybody thinking, to get a sense of what everyone is doing. But that's a really big challenge and a big question. We haven't gotten great guidance from the state yet about secondary programming. Questions, comments? That just gives you an update on where we're at and what our current pressure points are. And I want you to know what those are, because you will sometimes get emails as a board. And just so you know, as new board members, if ever an email goes to the entire board, Michelle will typically work with us and she'll respond on behalf of the board, and you'll get a copy of her response and it'll say on behalf of the school board. Otherwise, each and every one of you tries to write a response if it's something that goes to everybody on the board. You may get individual questions and that's a different story, but when it goes to everybody. Other questions?
Christine, I had a question about, well, a comment about the COVID numbers for elementary. When we had, when we were briefly in hybrid model, in the past, the numbers, the COVID numbers that were reported on our website, you couldn't tell if they were from the online students or if they were from the students who were on site. So as we move to on-site elementary, while we still have some kids in online, it would be nice if we could separate those so that we could understand if any kind of outbreaks were occurring within schools or while students were at a distance.
No problem. We can work on that. I can talk to Alicia about that for sure.
Thank you.
The other thing I'm just going to mention, someone asked me, what's the metrics for shutting back down again? It's really not county rates. It's if we're ever so short staffed, that because if county rates are really high and people are catching COVID and have to stay home, and we get to a point where we can't fill all the vacancies in substitute positions, that's when we might have to have a temporary, but I don't see that being a regular thing. If we had to shut down a class or something, it would be temporary for that group. But our goal is once we open, we stay open for the year. We just may have to we may see some hiccups until we get everybody vaccinated if we have too many people out quarantining or what have you.
One other thing is if you opt out for the rest of the year, or if you just opt out right now, are you out for the rest of the year? Okay.
No, not at all. And what we're trying to get families to do is if you decide you're going to keep your child home in distance learning, great question. We would love if you could keep it as such till the end of the trimester. But especially at elementary, we know we have to be flexible. Somebody may have a change in job situation. They may have been like, I'm working from home, I can have my child home. And then all of a sudden their job changes, they have to go to work in person and they need their child to go in person. At elementary, we have to be flexible in that regard. And our principals all understand that.
Okay, Christine, I also have the idea, when I talk to people in my neighborhood, folks that I know who have children in the schools, I think some kids are doing great in online. I have 3 kids of my own. 2 of them do great online. 1 of them, terrible. So the one who's terrible, fortunately, is an elementary student. And so I can look forward to him going to school soon. And then the other 2, I'm not super concerned about. But as I talk to other parents, it's just not working for them. Some of their kids it does work for, and some of it doesn't. And so they're just really desperate. And, if they have an elementary kid, great. If they don't, if they have middle school, high school kids, then they still are struggling with this. And so they have to look, right now we have our school board members have in our inbox an email from somebody saying, hey, you got to open up or I got to find a different school for my kid. And earlier today, I had a conversation with another parent who said, you got to open up or I got to find a different school for my kid.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that we've already lost, 300 some kids. And I know as our neighboring schools, if they're going to open, will continue to lose kids because those parents who are desperate will go there. And I understand the guidance from the state and that we're not quite where we need to be with the numbers. But I think, the families are really hurting. And when we are able to move to the secondary to in person at the secondary, I feel like we need to move fast. And I get it that we might not be able to move until the numbers go down, but I am just really concerned. And I suspect there are a lot of families who would be happy to go back to school at the secondary level, even if the numbers are where they're at, or if they increased even.
Oh,
they
of
would
course.
say, I'm happy to send my kid back. I'm not worried. And I know there's teachers too, maybe not enough to staff the buildings or whatever. Anyway, I guess I'm not really saying anything helpful in that regard, because I'm not saying I think we should open up, but I'm just saying that I have a lot of anxiety about where we are with the secondary. And as soon as we're able to move the secondary to some in-person opportunity, my freshman, she hasn't been to North because of the distance learning. She was in hybrid. She said that she went for 3 half days. It's just really tough. So I guess my hope is that as soon as the state clears our district to go back at the secondary level, that we can do that quickly.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'll tell you, as I said earlier, one of the challenges in 622, it wasn't even the issue, even hybrid's hard for us, right? Hybrid is really hard, which is why our elementary staff voted not to do hybrid. They wanted to go, if we're going to go back, let's go all back, right? Because it's so hard to do both. And in a district like ours, where we have such a high percentage of families choosing distance only, it's very, very difficult to staff both worlds. And so we have to do a survey to figure out how many of our secondary families would come back in person if we open back in person. The dream would be most say yes, because then we can open more quickly and efficiently, because then we don't have to try to staff for the kids that are still staying at home. But without question, our goal would be to open as soon as humanly possible. And I will say, in the meantime, we do have bus routes running. Principals are increasing the numbers of students that are coming in for academic support, even right now in the secondary programs. Whatever happens at secondary, when we do open back up, whether it's hybrid or in person, it will be full length days. We're going to have to figure that out. And then how do we figure out how to staff both worlds, right? The in-person and the online is our biggest challenge. And our district, like other districts that are high diverse populations, are seeing a lot higher numbers of families choosing online only. Our districts that are much wider in population are seeing much higher percentage of families wanting to go back in person full time. And it poses a really unique challenge to our district. And that's why districts like ours in Minneapolis and St. Paul and some of those other really diverse populations districts are seeing a unique challenge in the numbers of families that are split in that regard. So that's tricky too. But we're all about getting them back. I mean, there's nothing better for our students than to get back to school. We also have to work on getting staff to come in and do the work too, because there's a lot of concern about COVID too. So I hear you. And I agree wholeheartedly.
I'm a lot more cautious than that. I firmly believe that our students do better when they're in school. My experience with my family and with people that I talk to regularly, all would like to see people back in school. But I also want to err a little bit on the side of caution. There are 300,000 people dead. In the best of all forecasts, we may possibly vaccinate 70% of the people by next fall. The fact that we might be able to vaccinate teachers next month doesn't do a whole lot when the community spread is still what it is. I actually hear more from parents who don't care if their kids go back to school as long as their kid can play football or their kid can play hockey, or, you know, there's all these things that kids shouldn't have to wear masks even at practice because that interferes with their breathing and then they don't function well. When study after study says that wearing a mask does not prevent oxygen uptake in an athlete's body, there's just so much contradiction out there in people's perceptions that as a board member, you are always going to find me being the person who says, oh, wait a minute, let's take a look at this. Because I think it's one thing to want to say that we have an obligation to do what the public wants because we represent the public, but we also have an obligation to do what is the right thing to do. And not necessarily the right thing is not necessarily always in the moment, because we happen to get 400 cut and paste emails from parents. The situation, I think, is a little more broad and a little more important than just trying to do what people think we should do. You're just always going to find me being the person who steps back a little bit and says, let's take a look at this in the context of what's going on with the pandemic and with the vaccination rate, and if the vaccination rate actually prevents the pandemic from getting worse and shows us some light at the end of the tunnel. There's just a whole lot of stuff out there yet. So I think that the district is doing the right thing in trying to look at the figures in a real time way, but you're always going to find me to be a little hesitant to do it just because people think we should. I firmly believe that when it's the right thing to do and the right time to do, the district will do the right thing, but you're just going to find me to be a little more cautious than just saying, yeah, I want my kids to go back to school, so let's do it tomorrow morning.
Well, and I'll just add too, communities of color are disproportionately impacted by COVID. And we represent a school district with very high diversity. And we're often compared to Stillwater, South Wash, White Bear Lake, Matamita, and they don't have the same demographics we have. It's just quite frankly the truth. And so we are pressured a lot to do what they're doing. And yet at the same time, the families that are pressuring us to open up I have yet to find a family of color that's the one calling. It's white families, middle-class families, typically. But it doesn't mean it's not important. And I do think we have to get there. We have to be mindful of what if we did a survey and our families said to us, 95% of our families are like, yep, I'm sending my child back to school in person. But when we're still sitting at 50% rates of families who are choosing that their children are going to go back in person, that says a lot about where our families feel ready. And so it's really tricky to try to juggle all that. I mean, and these are the things we talk about, right? You know, my own sister is a chemistry professor at McAllister College, and she texted me yesterday and said, do you have an oxygen meter at your house? And I go, yeah. My mom, who is 75 years old, lives with me, and she has a former nurse, and she's got an oxygen meter. She goes, can you do an experiment for me? And she said, there's some emerging research. This is an example, right? She goes, there's some interesting data about racism in science, racial bias in science. And she said, there's some emerging research that shows if you put your finger in an oxygen meter and you have darker skin tones, higher levels of melanin, you're more likely to read as having a higher oxygen rate, right? It's more likely to give you a false high on your oxygen level. Whereas if you have very, very white skin, you're more likely to get a false reading of lower than your actual oxygen level. And there's some questions out there in the world of science right now about to what extent has that impacted who's gotten admitted to emergency rooms and who hasn't, right? Because if the oxygen sensor has a bias towards, under-reporting low oxygen levels in people with more melanin in their skin. And so interesting thing. So she's like, can you, and she knows in my house, I've got a lot of kids. I've got a lot of people who live here and people who I pick up along the way. I mean, there's never, it's not a small household, and there's people with lots of different melanin levels. And she wanted us to each take 10 readings and send us her data just for an experiment. But it's pretty interesting stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of issues, and I mean, I'm totally on a tangent right now, and I shouldn't even go there right now, but I just want you to know, like, that there's a lot of things out there too, that we have some factors that make us different in the way we think about things and respond to things than our real close neighboring school districts do.
Well, Christine, I just want to add that that's not a tangent, that's research.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they've also done research on those motion sensor public bathroom.
Oh, yes.
They never work for me because I have a darker skin. So
yeah.
They're meant for lighter skin, white people. So
it's very true. This same sister of mine, I was telling her my son is taking PSEO classes at the U of M right now. And in order to take a test online, he always says, can I go to your bedroom to take this test? And I said, why do you have to go to my bedroom? He's like, it's got to be a bedroom that doesn't have as much stuff on the walls, or because when they take the test, and I don't know if your university is doing this, Charlotte, but it like literally you have to scan the room. It has a video camera of you. So like, even if you were to try to cheat and had notes down below, it would catch your eye movement and flag you for a review of the film of you taking that test. And I told my sister about this, who's at McAllister. And she said, yeah, McAllister didn't adopt that kind of a system for taking online tests at home, because it falsely flags people of color in those, in that video monitoring system that is out there. And so it over-identifies people of color as being potential cheaters on exams, when in fact there's some real racial bias to the programs. And I'm like, see, that's the kind of stuff that's super interesting, and we have to be so mindful in our work in everything that we do. So, and I thought that was really interesting that the U of M is using that program, and McAllister said, we're not buying into that program. She said, we just had to make a decision that our tests right now are going to be open book exams because this program, those programs that exist right now aren't working yet.
Christine, can I make a comment? Mm-hmm. I resonate so much with what Steve said, what Michelle said, and also what you said. I just want to say that talk about pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my world is the state government, and the pressure is going to just ramp up on you from
mm-hmm.
the state to open up. Mm-hmm. I mean, the very conservative members of the Senate, for example, are just harping on open our schools. I mean, they don't even wear masks in the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I really appreciate this idea of pressure, and people just have to remember, as Steve said, we're lucky that we're alive. we're lucky if we're healthy. We're trying to keep our kids healthy. That's our number one thing, trying to keep them out of the hospitals and so on, and our teachers and our helpers.
Well, and even essential workers, and I think about this too, even essential workers, let's say somebody works in a grocery store, as my stepson does, essential workers, what have you. They don't have to be in an enclosed room all day long with a rotation of 150 people coming through it. That's a very different experience, right? Than, even in your dentist's office or what have you, you're dealing with one person at a time. You're not in a room with 25 adolescent bodies, close proximity, what have you. So, yeah. But I agree. I mean, I also know, to Michelle's point, we have kids that are failing. They're not just academically, but social, emotional, mental health. One of my greatest fears every day is we're going to have, a suicide. I'm so afraid of that every day because people's mental health is really, really off the chain right now. It's not safe. It's not a safe place because we don't have enough contact. And I know our schools are really working to build intervention support systems, but it's never good enough because we don't see the faces of our students in front of us. So it's a balancing act.
Those same students would suffer greatly if their mom dies or their grandma dies or their dad dies, or, I mean, it's such a balancing act to figure out what's the right thing to do and what's the right time to do it.
Without question.
I just want to say, Christine, take care of yourself. All right. I mean, you are stretched thin, and you didn't go into the superintendency thinking this is the kind of stuff you'd be, this public health stuff. This was not even on your radar, and now it's just consumed your world.
It does.
So, take care of yourself.
I appreciate that. I'll say, just like among our teachers have told me, they've never felt closer to each other. So our first grade teachers in the district with 9 elementary schools, they used to know their own pod at their school, but now the first grade teachers know all of each other across the whole district, across 9 schools, same for every grade band because of the collaboration. I feel the same way about superintendents. We have never, ever bonded as much as we do now. We meet every week, every single week, and we have for many, many months. We get in arguments with each other, we have discussions, we have whatever, but we are closer than I think superintendents ever used to be, which is a really, really amazing silver lining here. So
that balancing act too kind of goes right into, we hear a lot about how the distance learning model is not working. We hear that a lot because I think people are more, they're much more, it's much easier for them to speak up when something's not working, when something is working. So we don't really hear anything about the good things that are happening in distance learning because it's working. Why should I say anything about it? Why should I congratulate anybody? But I've seen some amazing things coming from amazing teachers doing amazing things during distance learning, and we can't discount that.
I agree. There's been, and I will tell you, our teachers have gone so above and beyond. I look at our distance learning lessons compared to many other places. We are crushing it in as to the extent we can. I'm so proud of our team. I met with a PE teacher, elementary PE teacher last week, and her big concern was, if I have to do both, I'm not going to do as good of a job with the online kids. And she showed me all the lessons she creates. They are so in depth, so phenomenal. You wouldn't believe that for a PE teacher in elementary school, and it's very different than some other places. So I'm proud of our team, but it's a challenge we're going to have to continue to work through, and I'll have to continue to seek your input and advice along the way as well. So we'll stay in communication. This will be a topic at every board meeting, work session, or in-person board meeting. Business meeting we have along the way. So we'll continue to discuss, and I'll keep you posted. And I will also send you guys messages if I start to hear some trends are shifting so that we can make decisions together as well.
All right, thanks, Christine. Do you have another topic?
I had one quick item. It's not a presentation. It's just a really quick topic. I just wanted to throw this out there. You all know that we've been talking a lot about racial equity work and preparing ourselves to do. One of the goals we have is to continue to interrupt systemic racism wherever we see it. How do we take that work and bring it to every single decision we make? And a topic has come up this week that I wanted to bring to you all. So do you all know what a Bitmoji is? So have you ever seen when someone sends you a text and it looks like a little animated person of themselves, or a cartoon character of themselves, but it's kind of like cartoonish, but it looks like the person? Have you seen those? Yeah. So that's a Bitmoji. We have an elementary teacher who has, our elementary staff have all created Bitmojis of themselves. And this is an elementary teacher who created a Bitmoji of herself in her elementary teaching classroom. And in her Bitmoji, she has a Black Lives Matters t-shirt on. The cartoon version of herself does. We've had a parent who's really concerned about that, has come to our offices with concerns about it. And I want to share with you a little bit of what my stance has been along the way. We've had this conversation before. It's not new for us, but it was usually an in-person situation. And my philosophy has always been, in our schools right now, we have in every one of our building entrances, and I think I brought this to you guys in the summer, we have in our building entrances posters that say all are welcome here, the rainbow sign, just to make sure people know we will not be discriminatory against our LGBTQ community. And I think I told you earlier this summer, my feeling would be Black Lives Matters is the same as all are welcome here. I know people feel like it can be a political statement and in a different kind of a way, it's interpreted some different ways, but in my mind, how could you disagree that Black Lives Matter, right? And that our systemic racism is so deeply embedded in our entire society. So I just want to talk to you about that because this is a parent who, if we do not make this teacher remove it, will be coming to our school board. Actually, not in January. She's decided it's going to be February because she needs to have a family member come with her or whatever. But my response is, I'm not going to make the teacher take off the Bitmoji t-shirt because I feel like our Black students have been so long marginalized in our system that I don't see a problem with it. But I do need to get your input on that because this is going to be something that's going to come to the board. You will hear about it. I know there's concern that if you allow that, you might get somebody else who decides, well, I'm going to wear a white supremacy shirt. I feel like that is different. If someone wore a shirt that said white people matter, what are we going to say to that, right? But I think it's different to say people matter. That's just my feeling on it. I just want to know how you all feel. I have not directed this teacher to remove the cartoon t-shirt from her Bitmoji. This parent's not happy about that. And before it comes to you, I would like to just make sure that I check where you all are at with that topic. Steve. Enough said. Look at his background.
That's how I feel about it.
What would our what would be our what would happen if we did run into a situation where somebody, a student or someone, came in with some sort of white supremacy propaganda?
So here's the thing.
How would you handle that?
It's a really great question. And this gets at the need for a policy. We do not have a policy at this point about political attire. We don't have anything banning it. We had an issue that came up last year where a bus driver was wearing a MAGA hat. And the question came up, can we allow him to wear a MAGA hat? Well, we looked in our policy. We don't have anything that prohibits that. Now, that same bus driver decided to write in the dust on the side of his bus, MAGA. That we can prohibit because that's our bus property. You don't get to write on it, even if it's dust. But we did not have we don't have a policy that says no political attire. Now, it can warrant the conversation as to whether we need to create one. But I also feel like our policy that we currently have is that you can't wear things that are going to cause disruption in a classroom or an environment setting, right? So if your clothing causes disruption, we need to address that. I will say perhaps, and we are currently looking into what other policies exist. There's not a lot out there, but the couple of districts that have tried to ban people from wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt, it's blown up in their faces, incredibly so. Lakeville School District was one of them recently. And Richfield Public Schools was one as well. If you Google Richfield Public Schools and Black Lives Matters. Now, Richfield, I don't think actually banned the shirt, but there was a story of somebody who was terminated who said the shirt was banned, which I guess wasn't necessarily the truth, but it caused a crazy disruption. I think we can think about that in terms of our response. I think this is where if somebody says white supremacy of some sort, but my contradict, I kept thinking like, okay, so if someone were to show up and say white people matter or all lives matter, right? Okay, I don't feel like that's something we can necessarily, if we're going to allow Black Lives Matters, I don't know that we can ban that. But I think a white supremacy is a different layer, right? So I don't know. We have to think about that. And I'd love your thoughts. Like, I really want you guys to be open and honest. Like, this is, we talk about walking the walk of racial equity. I just really would hear what you think about it.
Exactly right. There are some things that rise to such a level that we have an obligation to take on these conversations and lead the way. Just like we have in previous years over other issues, we are leaders in this district and we have an obligation. Some things just rise above it. I certainly would not endorse a Confederate flag in the front of our school to support the things that happened at the nation's capital this week.
Mhm.
But I certainly would, I would be the first person to be among those who stood in line to preserve the right for students or families, whether it's a political yard sign or any other thing to have to do with Black Lives Matter. Some things just rise above
Mhm. Mhm.
these types of conversations, and we should be willing to take them on head on.
Mhm. Charlotte, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I might be biased, but Black lives to me has never meant to be that all lives don't matter. It means
Of course.
all lives matter, but it means that at this point we're talking about racial injustice that happens in Black people. And so for me, having a Black Lives Matter is a civil rights type movement that that should be embraced by almost everyone. And it does not at all mean that all lives don't matter. So that's my perspective on it. And I think that we should be able to raise, as a school district, we should be able to raise those kind of issues that happen to Black and Brown people. And especially since we have over 60% of our students of color, we should be able to embrace those issues and really look at them and how we can improve the lives of the population that we serve.
Mhm.
I've never seen it as white people don't matter.
Mhm.
It's just like at this point we're talking about racial injustice, and it's a civil right matter, and that's all I see. I don't look at it any further than that.
So one thing I'll tell you, when this issue arose, our assistant principal Troy contacted one of our legal counsel folks, one of our attorneys, to get an opinion. Their opinion was to have the teacher take it down until we have a policy. So he asked me what to do, and I said, no, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with what our attorney says. And by the way, I have another attorney I can call and probably get a very different opinion on that, right? And so the advice was, and she actually understood that I probably wasn't going to agree with that. She just said, then you have to be ready for what comes after that if somebody disagrees and has a different perspective and tries to do something disruptive. And I think that's where we have to get into a conversation about how does our policy that we're going to develop propose to handle this. And I don't know if there's probably a way to write the policy, and I don't think there's any that exists because we've been looking. I think there's a way to write the policy that says advocating for and support of any group, as long as it's not overtly marginalizing or shutting out another group, is acceptable. So if someone were to say all lives matter, or even white lives matter, that doesn't necessarily Black lives don't matter. Like, but if you show up with white supremacy, that is overtly marginalizing another group. And I think that we could probably write a policy in a way that says advocacy in support of any marginalized groups of people is acceptable. There's probably a way to do it in a way that can be done that that will solve the problem. Now, for right now, and our attorney advice was have her take it down until you figure that out. And my thought is, no, I feel like the message that is sent by saying to take that down is so harmful and not worthwhile. So we might get some backlash. We might get some other communication from somebody else. It's one parent. We have not gotten loads of complaints from anybody else. It's one parent. And I also feel that, so somebody else comes back with a different opinion, we handle it. If it's causing disruption in the classroom and causing people to feel unsafe in a classroom, I can't imagine that a Black Lives Matter t-shirt makes a white person feel unsafe in the classroom. But a white supremacy t-shirt could make a person of color feel unsafe in the classroom. And I feel like there's got to be a way to write that doesn't, that distinguishes the difference, right? To what extent are we harming others in what we say and do? But I don't, this isn't just my opinion. You all are the school board, and I report to the school board, and whatever we decide or don't, whether we do or don't do something, right now we haven't done anything. I'm surprised you haven't heard about it yet, but you will be hearing about it soon, because this is one that our assistant superintendent has talked to, but this parent's been very clear they're going to be coming to the school board. Which is fine. I'm not afraid of that. I just feel like we have to be clear what our values are and what we believe in and what we're going to stand for.
I have just a couple of comments. I think when we think of situations like this, what is the big picture, for that individual teacher, thinking about their feelings around why it's up and what was being discussed in their class, right? Maybe they were actually doing this to support students or show, everything that's going on in our world right now is a major teaching moment for our students, and they adjust so much better than we do as adults. And you answered my one question was, is it just one parent or is it a bunch of parents coming to you? And so I think that makes a difference too. Is it just affecting one, or is it disruptive to others? And I don't think this will be the last or the only bringing this up to the board, because I think this will just continue in just different formats and ways. And I think looking at it, was this a teachable moment from that teacher to their class? And being able to decipher that as well, I think is really important.
So this is an elementary teacher with young kids. And I don't know that there was a discussion at all about it. It's just the way her Bitmoji was created. So with that, I'd love if you have an opinion, Julia. It's okay to have an opinion. You get to have one, and you get to just say what you think, and this is a safe space to do that. But
I agree. I think it's fine. I think we are silencing that teacher's voice if we tell them to change it. That would be like me saying, hey, change your picture when you turn off your video because it's a picture of my face and I'm brown. That could be something that somebody like me could say, but that's what I want my profile picture to be when I turn off my video. I don't want it to be just nothing. Mm-hmm. So I think there's no harm. You talked about putting into policy advocacy for this. And I think another part of it too is adding if there's any harm or risk, because that's where, how do we define that? Because that's very different to everybody. And a Bitmoji with a Black Lives Matter is not harmful or risky to anyone.
Can I say something?
Mhm.
I'm so glad Julia and Charlotte are on our board. I really appreciate your input. You know, to my way of thinking, I think that teacher, given that we are 65% students of color in our district, I think that teacher was trying to make students feel safe.
Mhm.
And I'm all about kids feeling safe, you know? So good for you, Christine. I think that was the right call.
I also would say that, especially following the insurrection at the US Capitol, there's a real rawness, especially among communities of color. And a lot of conversations around what happened to what the lack of police response, for example, to an insurrection on the nation's capital of mostly white people. It's very raw, and I think there's a whole interest in having people feel supported and cared for. And I agree, Nancy, that it's really great we finally have some school board members of color. But I also know we have white board members here that can be amazing white allies and have done so already. This is a board that has stepped up in other challenges that we have. And I feel like we have a board that's very racially conscious and has had really amazing experiences that they've contributed to. And I think, you know, it really says a lot. If you're going to ask Black men and women, what do you think? Well, of course, there's going to be one level of opinion, but when white men and women come forward with some of those same recommendations, it's very powerful. It can be powerful, especially when we're talking about like, what is our stance going to be? And can we handle the pressure? I think we've had a couple situations over the last couple of years that we here as a board have faced. And we've had some frank conversations like, this could get ugly. Are we ready for it? And you guys have made me so proud. In some of our most difficult nights, you have made me so proud. I think it always comes down to, where do you want to be on the side of history? What's the stand we're going to take? And to take the safe stance of following attorney's advice to say, no, have her take it down till you write a policy. I don't agree with it, but I need to know how you all feel because you're the school board.
Another thing about taking it down until there's a written policy is that if she does take it down, and then you said that at every school there's the all welcome with the rainbow, they might say, well, you're favoring LGBTQ plus individuals over, you know, Black lives. You know, I think the policy is good. I also think that letting her keep it up there is in the while we develop the policy is probably the way to go, because you don't want to get into further litigation about favoring one group over the other. Sorry.
Other thoughts? No, it's okay. Other thoughts? Michelle or Caleb, do you have any thoughts on that matter?
I'll just jump in there real quick too. Thanks for speaking to this, and thanks for sticking up for Black Lives Matter. Just kind of going back to just two things. I remember in June you mentioning putting up Black Lives Matter posters in the front of the schools to make our schools as welcoming as they possibly can. And I really think that's a great idea. And it goes to the equity work that we're working on and the equity policy that we're putting together. I also, since it's fresh in our heads, just like you were saying, Christine and Steve, about the insurrection at the Capitol, comparing the amount of just how easy it was for a sizable crowd of white people to walk into the Capitol and not meet any resistance. In comparison to what happened this summer or in May and in June when George Floyd was murdered is sickening. And the fact that that there's so many people on the sidelines not saying anything, I feel like one of the big things that I hear in the back of my head all the time is speak up, be supportive with what matter, support it. And so everything that you're saying, I'm in agreement. I agree with you, and I do believe that we should do exactly as you're saying and keep that Bitmoji up and design the plan or the policy.
Thanks, Ben. Caleb, do you have thoughts?
I think it'd be good to let the teacher keep the emoji. I don't think that it's making any of our students feel uncomfortable, and it's all about trying to make some of our students feel more comfortable. So I don't think we should have that teacher change anything.
Okay, thank you.
I think that I've shared this with you before, Christine, but I think I started on the board exactly 10 years ago, but it might be more, I don't know. But my very first meeting in 622 was a study session, and the conversation was around if we should allow teachers to put up a ally sticker for the LGBTQ community, the safe space, you know. So that was 10, possibly 12 years ago. And I remember being surprised by that conversation because I had been for so long, you know, I hadn't had kids in school before that. And for so long, I was in the adult world where, of course, you can put a sticker up.
Right.
But at that time, I remember that the conversation was, no, not necessarily, because that makes those people special, and we don't want those people to be special. We want to all be equals. So we don't think that you should do that. You know, there was a conversation, there's both sides, right? But that part of the conversation, I feel like it's similar, you know, 10, 12 years later, it's a little bit of a similar conversation. Like, what speech do you want to allow in your schools? And I know right now we're working on an equity policy, but separate from the equity policy, it sounds like we need, and maybe we have for a long time needed, some sort of speech dress code type policy. We have one for our students, which I looked at today and I feel like is a pretty good policy. And, you know, have something similar for our staff, not just for this one issue, but for any time it comes up. We don't want to, you know, it's easy to fall into feeling like, well, we support all the liberal causes and we shut down speech on all the conservative causes. And of course, people will accuse you of doing that if you allow Black Lives Matters, right?
Yep.
If they don't want it to happen. So yes, it would be really helpful to have a good policy so that we have, you know, we have determined what is within bounds and what is without. And, you know, I'm not sure that I would be super quick to shut down conservative speech that I was uncomfortable with.
Right.
Unless I was super uncomfortable with it. So, you know, having that policy, I guess, is the right thing to do. But, you know, I guess I'm in agreement with everybody else that, you know, I never would have told somebody to take down that triangle if they offered a safe space to LGBTQ students. That to me is no. And I wouldn't do that with the Black Lives Matters either.
Right. I think it's fair. I think it's all legitimate. And I think we have to also be ready for somebody who wants to counter that. And I think you bring a really
I mean,
good,
I think it would be hard for them to counter if they don't have examples. I mean, you said the MAGA hat, you let the bus driver wear it. So, I mean, unless we're being
Mhm.
unfair, I mean, best thing is get the policy in place. But, I mean, what's the evidence that we're being disproportionate?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's also the moment in time, the response, at least from my point of view, the response to a bus driver wearing a MAGA hat today would be entirely different than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago. And I just truly believe that as leaders in this community, we have an obligation to take these issues on. And I think that it's also important that we do it in a way that befits our responsibility as leaders in the district. So if people want to come to us with opportunities to have input into the drafting of our policy on these issues, I say let them have their voice.
Mhm. Agreed.
I think that, you know, the people who show up and do the work are the ones who run the world. And we've shown up and we're starting to do that work. If other people want to join us in that task, even if they see the world differently than we do, I say, let them participate, you know, have them help us draft a policy that's fair and inclusive to everyone. And I'd be willing to bet that anybody who helps us do that work will see their world differently tomorrow than they do today.
Agreed. I agree. This is helpful. I appreciate the conversation. This is the work that's really important above all else in our work. So,
Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button.
Just one other quick comment. I know that high school principals on occasion have asked students with provocative statements on their t-shirts to turn their t-shirts inside out, right?
mhm.
Yep. But
Well,
I think,
if it's a t-shirt that's promoting drug and alcohol or,
right.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. So again, good. We need a policy. Good to have a policy. I think, you know, intentions are important. I think that teacher's intention was not to provoke, but to make kids feel safe. I think maybe kids, you know, have a desire to kind of provoke, and maybe that, you know, so that's a different situation, is what I'm saying. But at any rate, it'd be good to be able to have the high school principals be able to, you know, refer to a policy as well when the kids
Oh,
come.
for sure. Well, and this, mind you, this is an elementary parent and an elementary teacher we're talking about.
Yes, right. But you know, things it happens in high schools as well, obviously. Yeah. And one other quick comment, which maybe a little humor. Last night, Chris Rock said on TV that when Black Lives Matter had a peaceful demonstration, there were Apache helicopters. When this armed mob attacked our Capitol, there were food trucks.
Isn't that unbelievable? That says so much right there.
Christine, I want to know if there's an educational opportunity here about social injustice and why Black Lives Matter are there, and because there are a lot of misconceptions out there, and I'm wondering if there's if I'm new and I can play that card. I don't know how long I can play it, but I'll keep playing that card that I'm new. But do we have educational opportunities for parents to be able to view and really understand what Black Lives Matter is about? It doesn't mean that white lives don't matter. That's really not what it's about. So, do we have those kind of resources for parents?
Absolutely, and we refer them to them. And this is a parent who a lot of time and energy has been spent with to help to see a different perspective. And this is a parent that's not yet in a place to see that other perspective.
Okay.
But you will probably get the chance to meet this parent. So feel free to take it on if you're interested. I'll say this. I agree. A lot of times people who have perspectives like that are very one-sided or rigid in that regard, maybe don't have a lot of experience and connections and communications with people of color. And they may not have that, but we take that on in every opportunity that we can. And sometimes that really works. Many times it works. It doesn't always work. And this is one of those cases where this person is very much expecting to come to the board with an argument. And I have no problem with that. You know what? Let's hear the argument. I just want to be clear where you all stand in the meantime, in the way that I'm responding to that.
You know, I would say on educating that I think right now seems like a tough time to educate people on topics like this. I do have a Black Lives Matter sign in my yard, and I've twice had people tell me it's a terrorist organization. So
there's that belief is out there. It's really actually out there, which is surprising, but it's very much out there.
Yes, so it would be hard to kind of reason with these people, right? So I think instead of trying to convince them that your side is right, instead you have a policy that respects, you know, free speech and puts limits when free speech begins to infringe upon others' rights, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's all I had for my update today, Michelle.
There's also the opportunity that if we do this in a reasoned and forthright manner, we will probably enable other organizations and other boards and other people who are struggling with this same thing an opportunity to stand up and be counted.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. We need to be the leaders in this, and we should be.
All right, so next agenda item? Yeah.
Yep.
So the next agenda item is a boundary update, and I think it's Josh.
It is. Thank you, Chair Yenner, directors of the board, Superintendent Tucci Osorio. So we committed to providing updates to the board on a regular basis regarding our boundary change process. And so tonight is the update for this time at the beginning here of January. So just a little bit of history and looking back over the last few months. Although this work isn't new, the real engagement work has been started and is about to start. And so just as a reminder, back in November, you all as a school board approved our guiding principles and the charge statement of our new 622 school boundary committee. In the month of December, we accepted applications from our stakeholders. At the end of this month, at the January 26th business meeting, I will bring a list of names to all of you and ask you to approve the list of names of the folks in our community who will be serving on our 622 school boundary committee. And then February 1st, which is just a few weeks away, is our very first meeting. And so we right now have meetings scheduled through the end of March. Now we do have time after March if needed to continue to meet, but we expect the majority of our work to be completed over the months of February and March. During the months of April and May, we'll finalize our work and then we'll send the board a recommendation to act on at the May 2021 board meeting, which will be one recommendation for new school boundaries. Just as a reminder, the committee charge statement. So the committee will be developing new boundaries that will be implemented in the fall of 2022. The committee will use the school board's Guiding principles, our school district mission statement, and the expertise of our district leadership to provide the foundation for the boundaries. The community members are expected to create boundaries that are equitable, that serve all learners and will serve our community now into the future, and of course also efficiently utilize district resources. And then as always, our work always comes back to our mission statement that we commit each day to develop and empower lifelong learners to thrive in diverse communities. And so our guiding principles, we do have 8 guiding principles. We know that all 8 guiding principles are not attainable for every household, but we will do our best to make sure that we can do so. And we have committed to a very transparent and public process that is going to be guided by our following statements. Again, our boundaries will be largely contiguous, which means they'll touch. We want to balance our socioeconomic status, balance our school communities of color and spoken languages. We do want to make sure these boundaries can last for 5 to 7 years, but know that they may need to change on a small scale based on demographics and housing trends. We want to keep our limit to busing for elementary students to 30 minutes to the extent possible, as well as keeping our walking distances to a half mile. We have many open enrolled students, and we are committing to moving our open enrolled students in cohorts to the extent possible to their new school. And our intra-district transfers will follow our current intra-district transfer process. And that means that if we have students who live in the Weaver boundary, they may ask to intra-district transfer over to Carver or to another elementary school. That's what intra-district transfers mean. And so back in December, I mentioned we had the application process open for our 622 school boundary committee. We did have 64 people apply, which is a great number. We are looking to fill the committee with 12 to 18 people that represent all areas and all constituents in our district, meaning we want to make sure we're balancing our racial identity, our gender, our geography, where they live within our district. We want to have a mix of parents and community members. And again, I'll be bringing a list of our proposed boundary committee members to you all to act on at the end of this month at our January business meeting. And so this is a look at our tentative schedule through the months of February and March. Again, our first meeting is coming up on Monday, February 1st. These are all virtual at this point in time. And so we will be meeting via Zoom. You can see the time frame is 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. And then we have our topics for the evening. And so the first evening, we're going to spend time getting to know each other, introducing everyone who's on the committee, talking about our committee charge, as well as having representatives from Wold, our architect firm, talking about our school district facilities, and representatives from our transportation department talking about our transportation systems. Over these first couple of meetings, we really want people to be able to better understand how the district works in all aspects. And so you can see in our second meeting, we're going to be talking about city demographics and growth. At this point in time, we have representatives scheduled from the cities of Maplewood and Oakdale to talk about city demographics and growth for their respective cities. And we're still working on getting somebody set for North St. Paul, so our committee members can really understand our unique communities that we have and what is taking place as far as growth in our areas. We will also have representatives from our teaching and learning department and our student services department, again at this meeting, talking about our educational and special programs. Again, we really want our committee members to really understand how the district works in many facets. And then we get into the work. And then over the next several weeks, we're going to be digging in and breaking into small groups and trying to move different boundaries around in different areas with a goal to come to a consensus by the end of March on a set of boundaries that will be recommended to you all for approval again, hopefully in May of 2021. We do have a boundary project website, as I mentioned before, simply isd622.org/boundary project. We will be posting regular updates. Again, we are committing to a very transparent process, and so folks can follow along on the website as meetings take place and as decisions are made. And so with that, if anyone has questions or any need for clarification, I'd be happy to take that right now.
Josh, so with that website, will the board and members of the public be able to view the meetings if the meetings are virtual? Are there going to be recordings of it?
We will record the meetings, definitely. And so we can definitely have the conversation internally if we post them. I don't see any reason why we can't post them, but it's definitely something that we'll look at.
Thank you.
Did we lose Michelle? I assume, so this is not a formal business meeting, so I assume we're done with that topic and we can maybe just look ahead to what our next topic is. I know the next items was actually
I think it's board check-in.
board check-in, and I know Michelle had a couple of items to share. Maybe we should just start with others and we'll come back to Michelle at the end. Who would like to go first for board check-in? Ben, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about the distance learning. One pattern that I'm seeing when I'm looking at my son's classes is the science teacher, English teacher, math teacher, all the teachers have every day a learning target and the relevance of that assignment. And it seems kind of corny to have those in there, and it might kind of like fly over the shoulders of students. But to see the teachers consistently putting those in there, it kind of shows that I don't know if they're getting that from the state standard strands or wherever, but it shows that there's consistency and a reason for all these lessons that they're putting together in their cohorts or in their groups. And it gives validity to the work that they're doing online. I want to point that out as like kind of a nerdy thing that I notice every time I go in, and it's just really good to see that kind of consistency in the work that's being done online.
I'm so glad you're noticing that. That is a big effort on the part of our administrators to have real clear focus, especially during COVID, because sometimes your time with students is limited, and to really make sure they've identified priority standards and what needs to be taught at each grade level, and they backwards map them. And I'm really glad to hear you saying that you're noticing that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's even in like gym or physical ed. It's like, you'd think you could, I think in a normal school year, you'd never think of that, or a parent would never see that. You know, it comes second nature to, I think, a teacher, so they would never even put it on assignment or something when you're in person. But to make sure like they have a really tight ship, they're in there every day, and it gives validity.
Agreed. That's great. Say, Michelle, I don't know if you can hear us. We moved on to board check-in. So that's what we're started doing right now. Not sure if you can hear us or not. Sounds like you got kicked out. Steve, do you have anything for board check-in?
Well, yeah, first of all, on a serious note, I want to extend my welcome to Julia and Charlotte. I'm looking forward to getting to know both of you and sharing inputs with you on board stuff. But tongue in cheek, Charlotte, your ability to play the new card ended in November after you were elected. And you will find yourselves, both of you, all of us actually, but especially the two new board members, you'll find yourselves voting on things that you have no idea what you're voting on. But trust me, from experience, you can reach out to the appropriate cabinet members and get the story. You'll have a lot of fun learning everything you ever wanted to know about school finance from Randy. But yeah, you're not new anymore. You're part of the team.
Yep. I love that. Michelle, I don't know if you heard what I said earlier, but we moved on to board check-in. So
Yeah, I actually could hear because I was on the phone, but I just couldn't get back in.
no worries, no worries. So we started with Ben and then we went to Steve. So I
Yep.
figured I'd start with the sitting board members who are not new. And then if you want to take back over, Michelle, I just stepped in.
Sure, thanks. You know, there's one agenda item here that I think Nancy asked us to attach to board check-in, which is around our school board compensation.
Mhm.
And
We hadn't
I'm
got to
sure
that,
everybody
so-
has.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Go to Nancy. I think it's perfect.
So, yeah, do you want to do that one, Nancy?
Oh,
Topic,
sure.
the board compensation.
I just think that we should up the compensation for the chair a little bit. Obviously, we're in unprecedented times here, but Michelle's had to do a lot more work than the rest of us, and she's doing a fine job. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyway, I just think, I guess as a gesture or whatever, you know, to increase it from 500 to 750 was my suggestion for next year, not this year.
Mhm. I would echo at least the fact that Michelle's leadership, like when you're a board chair, there's so many emails and responses you have to put out that you know, really take a lot of time and energy and effort, and we've never had a year like this, but it's been a wild year. So I'll echo what you said, Nancy. I think it's an important thought to give out, consider for sure. I would also argue
It's
that the
nothing that we have. Oh, sorry. It's nothing that we have to, you know, decide on today. I just thought, you know.
I can bring it forward as a next topic for discussion, and we can make a decision perhaps at our board retreat about it if you like.
Sure.
I agree. I definitely would support that, and I appreciate all the extra work that Michelle's been doing.
Okay, I think it's very nice of you all to say that. That's nice. And it has been extra work. I've been a board chair now for the last few years, and this last year was a lot of work compared to pre-COVID days, right? But I do think in the past we've had conversations around trying to stay kind of in the middle. And so I guess I think we're probably good. But
if I could add another thought to that too, I am all about staying in the middle. However, a lot of the things that have caused work are because we are trendsetters, because we are sticking our neck out. We are doing things differently. When we took on that gender inclusion policy, the amount of work that put on you to respond to the angry emails, when we take on the Black Lives Matters topic, and it's not about Michelle Yenner, it's about whoever is our board chair. If you're going to be a board chair for a school board that is making change in a way that's not always popular with everybody, it becomes a bigger job. And it becomes a bigger job than other boards that are staying the course with neutrality on everything. And so I would just make the argument that our board chair should be compensated differently than others, in the fact that we have taken on some big change that's not always politically popular with some of our constituents. Just my thoughts. And it's not about Michelle. She's been wonderful, but it's for whoever's in her place behind her or after her, if we're going to continue to be a board that's going to make move and shake up change. Because that's hard work. It's easy to be a status quo leader. It's not easy to be a change agent, and that is a lot more work. And we can discuss it later as well at our retreat or something, but I just had to throw that out there.
I mean, I'll never forget that meeting where she spent 2.5 hours reading angry emails. 2.5 hours. I thought I was going to die. And she just plowed through, honest to God.
And when you're a change agent, you're going to have more of that.
Okay, Nancy, do you have anything else So I think you said we did Caleb, and did we do Caleb? No,
Nope,
Caleb,
not
do you
yet.
have anything?
I just want to say, Charlotte, I'm glad you're here, and Julia, I'm glad you're here. Thank you both for joining the board. I think one thing I want to give a shout out to is all the staff who each Wednesday have been at our schools giving out meals for families, for students and also for adults. The Wednesday adult food options ended at the end of December, but I know the lines were really long. And I don't know do we have an idea of how many total meals that we've given out since we started?
Yeah, I know as far as family meals, in fact, I just wrote it down a minute ago. Let me see if I've got it. We did family meals. So part of what we got, and Randy referenced this, we got a grant for serving adult meals in the community, which is different than what we had been doing serving our students. With our students, it's been over 1 million meals, but hang on one second, I've got the number here. I just looked at it earlier in the meeting tonight. I was gonna bring it up and I forgot to. Adult totals. So over the last 7 weeks, we served 179,634 adult meals. Now, each one of these meals served a family of 7 people. Each one of these was 7 meals in a box, breakfast and lunch. And every Wednesday they were distributed, and we had amazing Thanksgiving, a huge turkey dinner and stuffing and all the fixings and the holiday meals. It was just amazing and incredible support. And other districts got the same grant we got and chose not to accept the whole full amount they were awarded because it was like, that's too much. We can't distribute that in that short of a time frame. Our district took what we got and asked for more and distributed it all. Our lunch and nutrition services staff worked overtime, round the clock. It was unbelievable how much they made this a priority. They are amazing people. Thank you for bringing that up, Caleb. It's great.
All right. Ben shared. Okay. So is it just Julia and Charlotte left? Yeah. Julia, do you want to go? Do you have anything to share? You don't have to, but you can.
I just want to say thank you for a very insightful first meeting, and it just makes me more excited for having this opportunity to participate in these conversations. And you know, Christine, you keep saying being the change and at the front of this, and you know, pioneers, like having people follow in our footsteps and come ask us how can they do that in their district. And so I'm really excited to get to be a part of this team with all of you. So thank you for all of your future advice that you will provide and direction. It will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And I just want to say, being the change isn't easy. There will be times where it's really hard and people will come at you. But that's where lean on this team. Be a team together and it's easier to get through it. If you believe in what you're doing, it's a lot easier to stand up for it.
All right, thanks, Julia. Charlotte?
Yeah, I want to echo what Julia just said about being excited about joining this team. And I look forward to getting to know each one of you. I don't think I know you that well, but by the end of 4 years, I think I'll get to know you. And I just want to be very thankful of Kim for helping me through this whole process of getting to know this and that, and logging into board book and this and email and all that. And Kim, you've really been very valuable for me and have been a great resource. And I really thank you for your time in helping me through this process. So
Thank you. I've appreciated every minute. Had lots of fun. It's always exciting when we get new board members. It's just a great time. We're all so glad that you and Julia are here.
Yeah, she was emailing me throughout the holidays. It's like, it's New Year's Day. You should have a day off, but she was emailing me. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of things to share as well. I think you all know that on Thursday is the kickoff to our Minnesota School Board Association Leadership Conference, and I think Kim has registered all of us. It's 8 to 1 on, what is it, 4 Thursdays in a row? And, you know, it's optional, of course. You all already also know that on Thursday, the 21st, there's a vote to put somebody on the District Director 6 position, which is on the Minnesota School Board Association. So that's several districts, including our district, White Bear Lake, Matamidi, and some of the other districts around here. I did ask them for a 20-year history of who has sat on that board. And we've had, for the last 10 years, we've had somebody from Matamidi. We also had somebody from White Bear Lake. And then prior to that, another person from White Bear Lake. But we've never had somebody from North St. Paul. So I did throw my hat in for that. And there'll be a session the second week of the MSBA conference, which is January 21st, where we'll vote for who goes on the ballot for that. And then there'll be a ballot that's mailed out to all school board members in those districts to vote. So please look for that. If you can attend, that would be great. And if you could support me in that position, that would be great as well. And, you know, just attending the conference as well. It's all virtual. If you haven't got any email, Kim will help you, right, Kim? So, the other things I have here is we have our retreat coming up. This is in board book. And we had talked about the possibility of having a topic around board self-evaluation, which is facilitated by MSBA, and then governance training as well. Governance training, I think most of us, when we came on the board, well, I know for sure I did have a session on governance training in our board retreat with the other board members. The board retreats are often kind of team building opportunities and then kind of professional development for the school board. So at our January 26th business meeting, we need to set an agenda for the board retreat. I would love it if we could do the MSBA school board self-evaluation, as well as some governance training. And I guess I'm curious what your all thoughts are on that.
I'll just say that.
What other topics do we have out there? I'd like to get an update on how our equity policy work is looking at the time. But are there any other topics out there that we need to address and kind of figure out a timeline on?
Equity policy and boundaries is a big one to also talk about that day. And then I'd like to just plant the seed for the beginning of a revamp of our strategic plan during the next school year, but that would be for just a brief conversation to get that started. But I'm just going to advocate too that having some of the general governance training is really, I think, a beneficial thing. Just kind of getting some of the Minnesota School Boards Association to come in and do a little bit of that, especially given a couple of new board members here, might be really helpful.
Could you remind me when the retreat is again, please? date?
It's Saturday, February 20th from 9 to 2.
Okay. Yeah, I had it January 20th. So that's good to know.
You know, the one thing I'll say is we've always with retreats had a timing issue that we load up the agenda and then we don't have time to get through it. So I guess my preference would be that we kind of protect that time for board development, and that other topics that we can move to study sessions, you know, that we would normally have at study sessions, we keep those there.
Do you know how long it takes to do the MSBA governance program and then look at our self-evaluations? Would that take from 9 to 2?
I'm not sure, but I suspect it could. I think Kim, after this meeting, depending on how this conversation went, was going to reach out to MSBA to see if they were available to do it and what the time would look like. But I suspect that it's the kind of thing that if you said we have 5 hours, that they'd prepare for 5 hours. And if you said you had 10 hours, they'd prepare for 10 hours. So. Kim, do you have anything to add?
I think the board self-eval, because what will happen if the board decides to do this is that we immediately would open up that survey. Charlotte and Julia, you haven't done this before, but the School Board Association opens up a survey and there's a window of like 10 days. And so you just answer questions. I think there were like 72 questions or something. Then they put together a summary. And then at the retreat, the members from MSBA would come back and give the results, and they're all confidential. Nobody is identified with the answers that they've responded to. And that takes about 2 to 3 hours, depending upon the in-depth work that you want to do with it. Like, do you want to develop board goals off of that? You know, you can kind of, you decide how much detail you want. Governance, it's exactly what Michelle said. If we say we want an hour training, they'll do an hour training. We just have to give them guidance as to what it is that you want. So they'll work within whatever window. But I do know that they need enough time and not too little time or they can't get the work done.
I know there's differing opinions out there of whether or not this training is worth it. I know a lot of the words that were coming out of our mouths 30 minutes ago is working together. So, I mean, if we're serious about working together, you know, I think it would be in our best interest to look at taking our self-assessments pretty seriously.
So, question is, is it a self-assessment about the skills that we have, or is it a self-evaluation about the job that we've done in the last 4 years? What is it?
It's kind of how you feel, where you're at as a board member. There's a bunch of different topics that they have listed out, and you weigh in on how you feel, how confident you feel around that topic. And so in the end, when they put all of our results together, they might say, okay, you guys are doing really well in this area, but it seems like you're struggling in this other area.
Okay, so
in those areas,
it seems like it'll be relevant. It sounds like it'd be relevant for Julia and I then, too, then. Since we're new.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes. Within board book, there's an attachment that says the standards for school board leadership. And those are the standards that MSBA has identified. There's, 5 of them that school boards focus on. And so then you answer questions throughout those 5 areas to determine how comfortable you are with them as a school board member. Okay, so from that conversation, I think, does anyone else have anything to say on that? So are we comfortable moving forward with the agenda items of board self-eval and governance training? And then I think we can have a conversation before January the 26th when this gets approved as far as other, we always have other things come up that we need to put on the agenda, as you saw tonight. But so then as we get closer to that date, we can see what else might go on that agenda. But as the main agenda items, the school board self-evaluation and the governance discussion. Okay.
And I'm fine
I
with
do
keeping
have
district agenda items off the agenda for study sessions, if that's your preference, for sure.
I think we should hear from everybody because, like, I don't want Michelle to make the call by herself. If we're gonna go all in on this, we should do it. I mean, it always feels like half of us are kind of like just not really into it. So, and if that's the case, I'd like to hear more about why. So maybe I can back you on that, because I've never done a board self-evaluation. Maybe nobody has. And I'll be honest too. I do a lot better when it's just like us. When a third party comes in, I get a little bit like, I'm like, well, what do they know that I don't already know? But I always end up learning something from it. So I'm hesitant as well, but I also feel like we've got a really good thing going. Let's take it to the next level. Sometimes there's decisions that we make as individuals. I don't really understand exactly why one person on our team or on our board decided to go that way. And maybe if I knew your perspective, I could educate myself better. But a lot of times we tiptoe around that.
Before there's an answer, I just want to say that when we were signing up for, when Julie and I were signing up for this new school board member mandatory training, I did read that it's a 3-part, and we attended the 2 parts, and there was supposed to be a 3rd part that was supposed to be with our individual school district school board members that was facilitated by MSBA. And so I'm assuming that this is it, right? This is that 3rd part, that 3rd training that we're supposed to have in our own teams, right?
No, I think you're thinking about phase 3. So MSBA calls it phase 1 and phase 2, which are mandatory for new board members. And then they also offer phase 3 and they offer phase 4 separately. This is just something that we do our own school board retreats where the board decides that they want to meet in a retreat, a more relaxed, informal session once or twice a year for topics that they want to do for their own development or interest. So this is separate from MSBA. The reason MSBA is being brought into this is because they would be the facilitator.
Okay.
Does
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
And can I just say though, based on what Ben said, that the reason that I sought this out in the first place is because as somebody who's been on the board for a while, I always am asking myself, are you a good board member? How do you know you're a good board member? Are you doing anything useful? How do you know you're doing anything useful? Are you making the right choices? Are you finding the right information? Are you doing what you should be doing? I don't know that. You know, you don't come on the board, and Charlotte and Julia, you could back me up. You don't come on the board knowing what you're supposed to do. You don't know what makes a good board member. And as the years go along, I think it's important to improve, do better. So maybe you walk on and you're an awesome board member already, but maybe there's things that you can learn along the way and you can continue to be a better board member. And we have this organization that's offering this service to us that says, hey, this is what a good board member is. We can help you evaluate yourself and we can help you move in the right direction. And I just feel like that's something I personally would like to take advantage of. And I hope that our full board would want to take advantage of it.
I'll just throw a concrete example out there. So in August, when we had our business meeting, we voted on a plan to support the district, the cabinet, Christine's plan for the fall COVID plan. We went and approved that. I hope I'm describing it correctly, but that's the best way I can do it. We put it to a vote, and I don't mean to call you out, Steve, but you voted against it. And that was really interesting to me because we didn't really talk about why you didn't vote for it. And I think it would have been a really good learning opportunity for me to kind of hear your reasoning behind that. I know everyone's got the ability to be free and make the decisions they want to make, but I will pull the newer board member card there. I was caught off guard by that, and I think I could have learned something from you if I could have picked your brain about that. But I didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing that. And I don't know if I would ever be comfortable doing that, but maybe getting a third party to come in and kind of find a way to do that in more situations, we would be more comfortable as a board to reach out to one another.
And it doesn't look like Steve is here with us anymore.
Okay, anything else? Anyone? Nancy, are you going off mute?
I just, I'm fine with the eval at the retreat.
I'm in favor of evaluation.
I would be in favor of it as well. And Michelle, I think what you were talking about is really important, that just making sure, are we being the best versions of ourselves when we come into these meetings and we're representing our stakeholders? And I think that's something to really reflect on with everything that, the community and board members and that everyone has endured in the last year with the pandemic and the social injustice. So this, might just be one of those good opportunities to kind of do that self-check of where do I stand? Where can I be better? I mean, there's always areas to improve. And so I think, especially with us being new, Charlotte and I, this could be a great way to get to know us a little better and for us to know you guys a little better.
Great, thanks, Juliet. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Whoops. Great. It looks like I just got kicked out of Zoom again. Okay, thank you for that, Julia. Anything else? If not, I think we're at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anybody wanted to talk about before we adjourn? No, then I don't think that we need a motion a second to adjourn a study session, right, Kim?
That's correct. We do not. You just need to end the meeting when you're ready.
All right, well, then let's end the meeting.